Let's get started. Let's get cracking. Let's have discussion. Yeah, and then we can. Saw this article. It's like this would be cool to talk about. Let's do it. So, let's go, bro. Aha. Yeah, it looks right. Right, Anyway, let's go. LGBTQ Afghans face a surge of rape, torture after Taliban takeover, reports say. The level of fear being targeted is so great that they feel like they're risking their lives to go buy food. A co-author of the report told NBC News. LGBTQ Afghans have increasingly been threatened, beaten, and raped since the Taliban took control of the country in August, a new report found. The advocacy groups Human Rights Watch and Outright Action International compiled a snapshot of how the freshly reawakened Taliban regime has targeted Afghans based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. While LGBTQ Afghans have long lived in peril, the groups concluded that the situation has dramatically worsened following the Taliban's takeover. The thing that I think we heard most commonly from people who we interviewed, who are still in Afghanistan, is that they don't leave their rooms. The level of fear of being targeted is so great that they feel like they're risking their lives to go buy food, said J. Lester Fetter, one of the study's co-authors and a senior fellow for emergency research at Outright Action International. And beforehand, these are people who had jobs or had always had ways to eat, who could go about their cities, and that's a real change. For the report, released Tuesday night, the researchers interviewed 60 lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer Afghans, most in their 20s, from October to December of last year. Through telling the stories of the interviewees' allegations of abuse, the report illustrates how threats, violence, and harassment against LGBTQ people have become more common under Taliban's rule. I can see how someone would say like 60 isn't a lot, but if these people are actually facing increased threat, then you're not going to be able to find them so easily, right? That's like part of the problems with these studies, is that for some of these things, people not going to talk, right? They're not going to reveal themselves to you, because there's a real fucking threat. A few weeks after Taliban forces overtook Afghan's capital, Kabul, in August, a 20-year-old gay man reported that Taliban members had detained him at a checkpoint. He was then beaten and gang raped, he said. Quote, "From now on, anytime we want to be able to find you, we will," Taliban members told him following the attack, according to the report. And, quote, "we will do whatever we want with you." It's fucking terrifying. That's terrifying. Oh my god. After the incident, the young man went into hiding, the report said, but the Taliban then moved on to harass and attack members of his family. In one instance, Taliban fighters spent 3 days in his family's home, interrogating and beating them, researchers reported. Yeah, this is... What do you do in a situation like this? Right? Under a regime like this? What is a person supposed to... Like, what are their options here, Like, they say they're going to find you, and it's not like just a gang that says that. Like, in the case of, like, you'll hear stories like this, in the case of, like, Central American, like, gangs, right? Drug gangs, those cartels, they'll do things like that. They'll find a person, they'll beat them, they might gang rape them if what they feel like doing, but and they'll say a line like that, we can find you anytime, right? And we can do whatever we want with you. That's exactly what they would say, which is terrifying. Like, absolutely. It's different. It's different when it's the state, right? And the state gets to use this kind of power against you. When that gang is, that's the country, right? Those are your officials. Wow. What do you do? I don't know. I don't know what would I tell this person? Stay strong? Like, what did I tell this person to do? Man, it's just all right. The report also detailed an uptick in abuse faced by LGBTQ Afghans from their own family members. One interviewee, a lesbian from a small Afghan village, said that her uncle and male cousins became emboldened to kill her after they joined the Taliban. Quote, "If you're not going to do this, we will do it," she recalled a relative saying to her parents, according to the report. Quote, "We have the authority." Can you imagine that? Ooh, I'm just curious. Like, did they always hate this woman? Right? Did they always like despise her? I mean, as soon as she came out as gay, and if she's she's young, then I mean, she almost certainly came out as gay during the U.S. Occupation, right? Um, so at that point, were they just harboring things? Under these regimes. I'm a little curious though, right? Like I like because there are some people who just act like sheep, right? Because the dominant narrative turns against them, like culturally, right? Like turns against the gay individuals. Then they'll like say, "Oh, I despise them," and the other way around too, right? When now I've told the story before, right? They did polls, right? Before and well, they did multiple polls. One was before and after President Obama came out as pro gay marriage way back when, right? Before he did that, there was a certain level of support in an African American community, right? But then that shot way up as soon as Obama said it. Because those people didn't really think about it, and they were like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess if he's for it, then so am I." And that was it. And then also, when the Supreme Court, right, actually made it legal, like before, like in the general American public in this case, before there was a certain level of support, right? And then afterwards, it shot right up because it's like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess I." Like I would have otherwise answered no, I'm against gay marriage, but I mean now that it's legal, sure, whatever. It actually doesn't mean anything to me, and I don't really put any thought into this. And then, it's not like I like considered gay marriage. I would just say no, I don't like it. I don't like it. So, but now that it's legal, I guess it's fine. Sure, why not? It's whatever. So I'm just like wondering if this is like kind of working like this, or maybe they just always despise this woman, because they're religious, and it's like rural fucking Afghanistan, and yeah, maybe they all despise her, but now that they know that the law is with them, right? They're like, oh yeah, I think if you're not going to do this, I'm curious exactly what it means. Like, you're not going to do this, like kill yourself, maybe? I'm not sure. He says we have the authority. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what it means. Heather Barr, a co-author of the report and an associate director of the Women's Rights Division at Human Rights Watch, attributed the attacks by family members to fear of the Taliban's wrath themselves. There's a kind of feeling that you get credit from the Taliban for turning people in. That a way to keep yourself safe is to rat out other people, Barr said. Some people are clearly feeling the way to keep themselves above suspicion is to hand in other people in this environment where there's no kind of protection from rule of law. Exactly. Right? So like I'm obviously a good citizen, right? I turned over this other person, right, that you don't like. So there's no reason to come for me and whatever I might be doing. Right? Like what if, like imagine, right? So OnlyFacts TV, our a friend in chat was talking about how the focus used to be, like at least in the American media, for the war. It's like, oh well, we gotta do this to protect women, right? Like the U.S. gives a shit about that. Okay, whatever. But that was like such a big focus. Oh, we're doing this to protect Afghani women from like the ravages of the Taliban, right? Like can't let that happen. Okay, so U.S. is gone. Taliban's back in control. Imagine being a cis woman, right? A cis straight woman who, for whatever reason, it has pissed off the Taliban. Maybe like you're an activist or something, right? Maybe you were a police officer. I saw this. This is one case of like this female police officer. You know, like they got fired. Like they laid off all those people. Pretty much everyone, every woman from almost all workplaces got like immediately laid off. And then they like terrorized her, and then I think they eventually killed her. Like the Taliban just like killed her, right? Any which way. So if you're in that position where the Taliban doesn't like you, right? Well, what are ways to get them to lay off? Report someone else, right? Report someone further down the line. So I can imagine a cis, straight woman reporting on like a gay male or whatever, saying, "There's your real problem over there. Don't hurt me. That one's against the state. That one's against Allah or whatever, right?" So, like in this type of environment, like tragedies like that happen all the time, right? The report also outlined how gender non-conforming individuals, in particular, have been subjected to danger under the Taliban's rule. Several of the report's interviewees told researchers that they were beaten on the street for wearing clothes that did not conform to gender norms or looked too Western. Every moment we receive threats and calls, said an Afghan trans woman, according to the report. Even children on the street say, "You still here? Why hasn't the Taliban taken you yet?" Holy shit. Holy shit. Yeah, because kids get it. You know, they hear the messages now. They're like, oh yeah, this is just how it is. Like they've conformed. Kids will conform very quickly to these things, you know. Ahmad Sadat, a former political science professor at the American University of Afghanistan, echoed the sentiment that among LGBTQ Afghans, trans and gender non-conforming Afghans are more vulnerable to attacks. A cisgender gay or bisexual male who could grow a beard, who can look like the Taliban, who could wear their clothing, who could dress like them, they won't even be questioned, said Sadat, who told NBC News that he was spoken with over 200 Afghans who have been targeted or tortured by the Taliban since August. A lot of Afghans want to get out, and we should try to help all of them. But we have to prioritize, Sadat added, suggesting trans and gender non-conforming Afghans should receive help first. So this is what I'm curious. One of the things I'm curious about. For the open panel, do you think the U.S. would actually do that? Like, actually take the effort to help trans and gender non-conforming Afghan? Oh, fuck. Is it Afghans? It really is Afghans? Maybe I thought it was, oh, whatever. I know. Maybe it is Afghans. I don't know. Whatever. But would the I don't know. I gotta look it up. Would the U.S. actually prioritize them? It feels like they wouldn't. It's Afghans, so I had it right the first time. Fuck. All right. Fuck. All right. Turn back. All right, that's fine. Look, shut up. I had it right the first time, all right? So I deserve credit. And OnlyFacts TV, thanks for being so kind as to gift a sub to Cold End. I very much appreciate your 30th sub. That's the channel. Awfully kind of you. So yeah. Back to it. Mouse work for me. To aid LGBTQ Afghans, the authors of the report urged other countries, and the United States specifically, to expedite their applications for evacuation and resettlement, support humanitarian assistance programs that specifically target LGBTQ Afghans, and apply diplomatic leverage. Throughout the U.S. military's withdrawal from Afghanistan in August, advocates and lawmakers urged the State Department to specifically include LGBTQ Afghans in its pledge to evacuate vulnerable people from the country. That request, however, went unanswered. Yeah. exactly. Look, and that was under a Democratic president. Look, this is under a Democratic president, right? Because the evacuation happened in August, right? So that was under Biden. It wasn't Trump being, super bad guy, evil guy, That was Biden. Biden's administration just ignored that. So, um, yeah. Uh, yeah, that's a shame. But describing the efforts of utmost importance. I mean, look, and especially at that moment when we were moving out, like when there was a general move of Afghan individuals, I guess it's hard to prioritize literally anyone, other than like the people who worked for like the U.S. Right? It's very difficult to target to prioritize anyone. It's just like, look, we just gotta move bodies out of Afghanistan as soon as possible. And so, like, you got kids, maybe we prioritize you. But oof, I'm not actually in that moment. I don't know what I would have done either. Like, and it's a logistical nightmare, right? Like, okay, prioritize gay people. Which one of you is gay? Right? Like, I don't. How to do that, right? Like, if you're a transitioning trans person, right? Like, significantly in your transition, but like not all the way there, I guess. But that might be easier to identify. But like, how do you identify a bisexual person? A gender non-conforming person is anyone who's like wearing like something different, like from the outside, right? It's a person who's wearing clothes that are like gender non-conforming, right? What does that mean? Like, so anyone could do that, right? If and consider someone really would do that if their lives were on the line. So I don't know. How do you tell? Like, it's a logistical nightmare. I actually don't know. Um, I actually don't know. Okay. Uh, but describing the efforts as of utmost importance, a spokesperson for the State Department told the NBC News in an email that the Biden administration will continue to help LGBTQ Afghans through diplomacy, international influence, and humanitarian aid. Okay, whatever. Sure. The spokesperson also acknowledged that evacuating LGBTQ Afghans is extremely difficult and potentially dangerous. Yeah. So, like, how do you evacuate them, right? To the airports? Do you gather gay people in the airports? Okay. Or at least the one airport, Kabul airport anyway. Do you send them to a specific checkpoint? I mean, like, wherever you're gonna send them, the Taliban's gonna know. So it's, oh boy. Like, it'd be easier just to do like a general evacuation. In that case, it might be safer just to do that and hope for the best for LGBTQ individuals, because you don't want the Taliban to know that specifically we got a bunch of gay people or trans people coming through. The best way we can say is that we know by numbers that we will help some, but we're unlikely to even be sure how many, since many people cannot disclose their sexual orientation. Exactly. Gender identity or sex characteristics due to shame, stigma, and fear of backlash, the spokesperson said, right? It's not as if they wouldn't get that from Americans as well, too. So, right? Like, who is the person, like, helping you out? Like, the American? Do they like trans people? Do they have a problem? It's not as if that's a Muslim thing, right? So, oh boy. Only Canada, United Kingdom, Ireland have publicly announced that they would commit to resettling LGBTQ Afghans. I disappoint overall in the international community sort of growing disengagement from all human rights issues in Afghanistan. I think that this one has been particularly neglected from the beginning, Barr said, referring to the plight of LGBTQ Afghans. I mean, it's been neglected as long as I've worked on Afghanistan, honestly, but this moment is more important than ever for people to actually engage and raise this issue, ex Barr, who has worked on Afghanistan-related human rights projects for 15 years. But like the situation is tough, right? Like, that's a tough situation. Evacuation is not the answer, you know? It's not like you're evacuating ethnic minority, right? And then where you can conceivably get them all out, right? You're not evacuating the Yazidis from, where did the Yazidis run from? Someone in the chat will tell me, right? There was like that Christian minority group that fled some country, Burma? It might have been Burma. I don't know, but one of those countries, right? Where there was a minority and they fled. You could conceivably move them all out. You're talking about gay people. There will continue to be LGBTQ individuals born in Afghanistan, and what are you going to do about that? There's got to be a long-term solution. So, okay. So, let's do it. Let's have a conversation if you'd like, right? Exclamation point open in chat. Let's this is an open walk-on panel. Honest members like you, yes, you're sitting at home may participate. Go into Discord server and go into the rowboat waiting rooms to be let in, and this link for your convenience. We'd love to have you. Yeah, let's talk about this thing. This is a tough situation. I honestly don't know. Honestly, do not know the best way to handle this. I don't know. Like, you know how happy I am to criticize the U.S. government, but almost there.
He's working on it.
He's working on it. He is. Indeed he is.
Discord's working on it. I clicked the button. I did the right thing.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I know what's going on.
Yeah, is it used by something else?
I'm streaming. So my camera's in use.
You're streaming?
He's got virtual camera.
Brento Box.
I should let you know, Prime, I'm streaming, just in case you didn't know we're live.
Brento Box streaming. Wow, guys.
I know.
This is a special occasion.
Sorry.
I'm gonna stream too. Let's go.
Yeah. Wow. Look, I'm excited. First of all, I'm super.
That's never a good sign.
Yeah. If it's different in any way, I don't know what to tell you.
No. I mean, like, look, everyone, you got to go check out my main man Brento Box. He is actually live. After months of promising he'll be live, he is live. Check him out at his channel.
Brian. Years of promising.
Years and years. If you got a camera, turn it on. It's a big help to the channel, and you do so. Yeah. So Brento's working on that.
Oh yeah, I just gotta turn this one up.
Yeah. Take your time. Take your time, buddy.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. K, for being here. Thank you, KO Dave. Thank you, Soy Adel. Thank you, spinning indicator. That is Brento Box, for being here as well. And I think we have some new individuals here. Yeah, Daniel Clark and a Base Knight. Hello, hi.
We've had him before.
Thank you.
I don't know. Is this person? I don't know. I have no clue. So
I think you were asleep last time. You were nodding off last night.
What?
Prime works too hard. He's
whatever.
being driven to the bone.
Anyway, let's get cracking. So yeah, what are your thoughts specifically, either on the subject of gay Afghans and their plight, right, and what the U.S. should or shouldn't be doing, or what we were talking about, more relativism? Well, what are your thoughts?
I don't think that it is the obligation of the United States to try and interfere militarily to liberate people who are being persecuted in other countries. I think that it is a horrible shame what's happening to that population in Afghanistan. I think that there should be resources available to try and get them out. Um, Maybe there could be some private sector involvement, maybe some
No.
international
You don't wanna do
organizations that can. I'm sure that there's support for those types of people.
Okay.
Maybe.
What?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
Well, yeah, I'm the token Australian, so I just wanted to plant a flag here so everyone can see it. That a lot of the time, when people question about the U.S. military involvement, it's never or often isn't just the U.S. Right? It's allies, and obviously the U.S. takes a sort of a leadership position in a lot of these cases. But I don't know. I think it's really hard when we've gotten to this point to say something like the US should kind of no longer interfere, and it depends what the US wants. If the US wants to be the greatest country in the world and wants to be a world leader, this is kind of some things you've got to do. I think it's just about how we do it. And I think for this, and I'll kind of just stop with this, is I think one of the main problems is we haven't been able to say often why a lot of these, like what's happening is wrong. We can't. It seems like taboo to question a culture. That's why I was asking Prime about moral relativism. There's a lot of people. Maybe there's people here in chat that there's a friend of mine that I got a little bit heated at dinner because she couldn't admit that the way that I would say most Western countries live is more moral than a lot of other cultures. We just couldn't agree on that. And I think if we're talking past each other at that point, well then, yeah, I don't think people are going to agree.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry that I haven't fixed the camera yet, but did anyone think anything else was going to happen? Did people think like it wasn't going to happen? Did like this wasn't the outcome? Like I guess I just always assumed that
No one's saying that.
they would be extremely persecuted once the Taliban took power. Not saying it's okay. I just always assumed it would happen. So it's like,
yeah, we all kind of understood that.
yeah.
Does anyone think that the gay people in that country weren't being persecuted prior to the Taliban taking control? Is anyone under the
No, but
impression
it's a. I mean, certainly it wasn't a great situation during the U.S. Occupation, but it would definitely is without statement going to be magnitudes worse under a Salafist regime.
And according to the report, it's saying like the Afghans themselves are saying it is actually worse. Right? That it's not like they were living the life before, but it's very much worse. It's there is no protections, and there's a state that's actively hostile to you.
Well, they weren't living the life like it wasn't like party Miami style every night.
No, it went from bad to worse.
Right. It was more like Iran or perhaps somewhere else in the Middle East, like Turkey, versus
not Turkey.
The horror of Saudi Arabia, right? Now we're at the head chopping, being thrown off buildings stage, whereas before it was like normal cultural repression. We can know that those are two different, very both bad things, but one of them is certainly worse than the other.
We're on some Chechnya shit now.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's an organization.
I do seem to remember when Biden first announced that he was withdrawing the rest of the troops from Afghanistan, that some people seem to be saying, oh, that we can't know for sure that this is going to end in disaster, and I don't know why they were saying that, because it seemed really obvious to me at the time that it was not going to end well for anyone.
Was this before or after the provisional government fell, though?
Before.
Okay.
Like
okay, maybe
they were saying
I can understand a claim of it before the provisional government fell, people assuming that the provisional government would offer some level of resistance, or at least more so than it did. Then I can understand that sentiment, but after they fell, then yeah, that's a foolish statement.
It never seemed to me like that provisional government was going to hold up for any length of time. Like they
Is there
had
anyone?
they had the full back. They had the not the full backing, but they had a big backing from the U.S. for 20 years, and they didn't drive the Taliban out then. So on their own,
You'd think in 20
course.
years you'd be able to set up some more resilient institutions.
yeah, apparently not.
Can I ask just like one quick question and maybe just a follow-up statement, just only because our perspectives are likely to be quite different. Is there anyone that thinks we should not have been in Afghanistan at all? Okay, cool. I'm just gonna take that as a no and ask my follow-up.
Should not have been in Afghanistan at all? Oh no, I'll take that position. Yeah.
You don't think we should have been there at all?
No, we shouldn't have been there at all.
Does that mean that we shouldn't be doing anything now?
I mean, no. So I guess like we shouldn't have invaded previously. We can help other countries. Like there are other countries that are with repressive governments, and we can assist, right? As well. But there are all kinds of ways to do that other than like an invasion. So those two things are separate, right?
So you know how I proposed a while back that we should not we should have kids working, right? I think that we need to bring back child labor. When we do that, we'll stop having to export so much of our jobs
Stardust, are you
overseas.
just gonna shitpost
So,
here?
hey, let her go. Go ahead, Stardust.
Excuse me. Yeah, seriously.
Wait, she's serious?
Okay, so let me finish, okay, before you guys fucking interrupt me, okay? I'm a little bit sick of it, all right? So, yeah, maybe if we bring back child labor, we'll stop exporting so much labor to other places, okay? And then we'll start having, some growth here. And then while we're at that, why don't we just start fucking deploying people much earlier too? Let's start getting them in there at 12, They're 12, they can take it. They're going through puberty. They'll be fine, okay? It'll be fine.
Okay.
Child soldiers.
Thanks,
There we go.
Sorry, I was interrupted by that, which I didn't even know what that was. But the only thing I was going to follow up to that was Dr. K. You said something before about like installing, maybe like having some better institutions there. Like when we were there. Something that this is anecdotal, so please take with this what you will. But my cousin was there as part of the Royal Air Force, the British Royal Air Force. My cousin's British because we're escaped convicts who live in Australia, obviously. And he told this story of they were teaching them how to build trenches to defend against the Taliban, and they were teaching them how to use the shovel, dig them deep enough, and blah, 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 to set up checkpoints. And the local police were so whacked out on heroin that they were pulling families over and getting families and children to do it. It is the people, I don't think, are ready for democracy there either. I think it comes very heavily from religion, which...
No, well, you said that the heroin was the stuff that was interrupting it, not the religion.
Well, no.
Your specific example.
Yeah, no, exactly. In that story, yes, absolutely.
Children were selling the heroin. We need to counter them.
So you would then sort of trace back to what's causing that heroin problem, eh?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is religious, and it's not that the heroin specifically. It worries me. It worries me a little bit that people are never able to even acknowledge that maybe it's a problem. Maybe the treatment of women, the liberation of women,
but Daniel,
in religion is the problem.
Daniel, there are Islamic countries, plenty of which are democratic. Tunisia is a very obvious example of a majority Muslim nation that's a fully functional democracy. So I refute that claim that it's just religious.
No, I don't think it's just. I don't think anything is just.
Well, it's not religious because, like, we can look to other scenarios that happened in the past, such as like the opium epidemic that happened in China, that directly has been affecting that country's corruption during the 1800s, and a lot of that it comes from much of, you say, opium, which is I think the same for Afghanistan, is also being one of the largest producers of heroin.
That's also an opium country. In fact, it's famously the country that was supplying the Qing dynasty with all its opium.
Yeah, for sure. And as that being part of its main culture, that the main issue then will just be opium, then to specifically, it's just they're being Muslim or whatnot.
I don't think it's a cultural thing. I don't think it's a religious thing either.
As I said, it's opium.
Exactly. You essentially have a resource there that is much the way of something like oil or cobalt, sort of this key resource that a hegemonic state wants to get its hands on and fuck around with and sort of play kingmaker in order to secure that resource. And that's sort of what you saw a lot of going on, at least in the northeastern parts of Afghanistan.
So anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down in that, but the point is that when it comes to helping Afghans, right? Like, I think we absolutely should do something. I think, especially since we've already interfered with their nation, that like it's a bit of our responsibility to do that, to be assisting them however we can within like with civil rights or with like lots of things actually, right? Because the situation there is fucking dire. In fact, we are making it dire right now by with the sanctions we have from the government holding back those resources, right? There's Afghanistan is going to might possibly be like the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world, and specifically because of our actions right now, causing a massive famine right this second. So yeah, well, we could start by not doing that, right? Like, it doesn't matter like what your sexual orientation is. If you can't fucking eat, right, that's going to be a bigger problem for you, right? So let's maybe start with that. Start about not starving them out, and then go from there. But yeah, I'm curious what other people have to say.
Well, you need something to elicit change, and so basically we went from having a strong military presence there, forcing them to behave, to not kill each other, to not kill the gay citizens, to trying to use our economic might to enforce that. And yes, that has a negative aspect, but you have those negative aspects no matter what when you're intervening in a situation like this, unless you are literally being a dictatorial occupying regime. And those
exactly.
are the two options we have, right?
Is authoritarian states and states that are opposed to U.S. hegemony, oftentimes when the sanctions come in a rolling, that just causes them to double down and strengthen relations with states that are opposed to U.S. hegemony, in which Afghanistan would have a very easy case with Russia literally right next door.
I think it's China, isn't it? Isn't China having like a good relationship with them?
Yeah, you could go do it through China as well. I'm pretty sure it would more likely happen through Russia in the long term, though maybe in the short term it's a little bit more on the China side.
Yeah, I think they already had talks.
Yeah, so when you put sanctions on a nation state, that really just causes them oftentimes to double down on what they're doing. That's the case for Russia, that's the case for Cuba, that's the case for North Korea, right? Is that they take the sanctions, they use it as essentially a propaganda tool of saying this country is opposed to us, it wants to destroy us, we're the only guys who are going to keep order, these guys are only just going to make you suffer and cause disorder. And then because you don't have sort of the hegemony of propaganda within that country, so you can't manufacture an alternative narrative to what they're saying in that country, you can't like say, no, we're actually just trying to do X thing. Like, they have basically the microphone at hand and they can say whatever the hell they want about you.
I mean, are you talking about
making
Afghanistan?
their job easier? Basically, any state where you've sanctioned.
Okay, well, I mean, Afghanistan, we just left them from an occupation from 20 years, so I'm not really sure, like what propaganda is. I mean, not that it wouldn't change people's minds, but I think they're probably not happy with that, right?
What, with U.S. occupation or with what?
With the U.S. occupation.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of people
the
who are
Taliban
trying to
wouldn't
leave
be
the damn
if they're
country.
in charge of the government now.
Yeah, no, the Taliban, of course, hate the U.S.
Yeah, well, apparently they're running the Afghanistan government.
Mm-hmm. But that's not to say that all Afghans are a monolith and, agree with the Taliban line.
True.
Far from that, in fact.
That's true.
Let's go to my man, Kobe.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay.
Good sharp, Kobe.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Got a haircut recently. Okay. Before I start, I kind of want to say, I think that anytime when you're talking about a country you've never been to, like Afghanistan. I don't think probably I've never been to Afghanistan. Probably nobody here has, and if they have been, most people they're probably there in a military context, which is obviously going to color your experience. You should probably go read books about people that have been there and stuff. So I'm going to recommend a couple. The kind of some of this information that I have comes from a book called The Soviet-Afghan War by Michael Geis is extremely good, and a book called The Taliban at War 2001 through 2021 by Antonio Giustozzi. I don't know how to pronounce that. Fantastic books. I think kind of talk about give an interesting perspective. I think how the Taliban won the war. And I want to talk about some of the stuff. Well, first I want to address the kind of Prime's overall thing because I think it's an interesting overall question. What responsibilities does America have to the people of Afghanistan after we have had a extremely influential role, regardless of what you think of that, in their country for the past 20 years, right? 20 more since the past very long time. I do think so. I think that we do. I think that we do just as a government that has the ability to make people's lives better. I think that if we have the ability to do that, we should try to do that. And especially in a country that we have screwed up and messed with and done a lot of really bad things. And I think it'd be good if we help the people, and especially the marginalized people in that country. But I do think that it is a little more complicated than simply a sort of East versus West culture thing or an Islam versus this culture thing. I actually think that one of the biggest things that holds Afghanistan back, and they talk about this in the book, The Soviet-Afghan War a lot, the tribal cultural construction is unbelievably deeply embedded. It's more embedded than Islam. It predates Islam, and there are feuds and there are rules and there are customs that predate Islam that make a lot of modern ways that we do things, regardless of how you think that they're good or bad, just make them very difficult. And in the globalized world, if your society can't fit like a puzzle piece into other societies, you're gonna have a hard time. Talking about the opium, I think that this is kind of a complicated situation. Opium has been something that has been smoked and used as a medicine in Afghanistan for a very long time. It's something that there are certain tribal communities that just grow it all the time and never stop growing it, even under the Taliban. And the Taliban even didn't stop them because they used it. They used it in a sort of tribal context. I don't know. They used it in some sort of context that was seen appropriate. The opiate production did drop to 1% of what it was during the Taliban's control. They dropped it a lot, and it really spiked a lot up during the U.S. occupation. The numbers, it's not 100%. It's not like it spiked up in 2005 and stood there and it's still there. It's more complicated than that. I believe it fell a lot. From what I understand, 2011, 2012 was kind of a heyday for the American occupation. We had really pushed back.
Production has been shifting towards the Golden Triangle for a while now.
Let Kobe finish.
One interesting thing that the book, The Taliban at War, talks about is that opiate. As Dr. K was saying, opiate production changes around. It's grown in other places. It's been growing. The opiate production in places like Myanmar has been increasing as the sort of civil society the civil society structure. They're having a lot of civil conflicts and stuff. But one of the interesting things was a lot of opiate production went to neighboring countries like the Stans and into some places in China. And the actual rate of addiction in a lot of the bigger cities in Afghanistan did not change. There were still a lot of addicts. A lot of people were actually on the drug, and the Taliban are extremely brutal about it. They take you into these giant brick. There's a Twitter video I saw, which I think I find it. They literally were taking junkies out of what looked like under a building or under a bridge, and they were very obvious. And I don't mean junkie in a derogatory sense. Just a person that's very obviously strung out on heroin, and taking them and shaving their heads off and making them giving them clothes and a Quran and putting them into these big kind of detox facilities. It seemed like a very, very brutal way, very kind of indoctrinating way of doing it. And there's a reason. There's a reason that opium production beyond it, that's where it's made. That's obviously, if you have opiate around, you're going to get addicted to it. One of the biggest jobs that became available for the average working class Afghan person, going back to the 1980s when the Soviets came in, was construction. Afghanistan is a very underdeveloped country. You have to build a lot of roads, a lot of dams, a lot of this basic shit. And in the America, we had slaves and Chinese and Hispanic labor and indigenous labor to do this. They don't have that, or they do. They have minorities in Afghanistan. But there's just even Afghanistan, that's what the people had jobs to do. If you work construction for 10 years, your body is becoming to deteriorate. Your back is destroyed. You have your arthritis, any of these things, anything. It's very difficult on your body. What do you do when you don't have money? opiate. That's extremely more difficult if you live in fucking Afghanistan. You live in the mountains of Afghanistan to find fucking opiate to deal with your medical problems than it is to try to go somewhere else. And you're going to become addicted to it because it's not opiate, it's black tar fucking heroin. I don't know if it's black tar heroin, but it's very strong heroin. And last thing I wanted to say is that many Afghans want a different country. Mr. Girl recently talked to Richard Spencer, and Richard Spencer gave this very funny answer to a question where he was giving his he was like, if you were a 100-year-old German, you would have lived through monarchy, and you would have lived through fascism, and you would have lived through communism, and that same frame is actually true for a 100-year-old Afghan. You're a person that has lived in a tribal society. You have a person that has lived under a strict monarchy. That is a monarchy that was reforming to a Western style society. You have lived under Soviet occupation under a Soviet or a socialist government. The socialist government in Afghanistan. I do think the Afghans I do think the Soviets were kind of like being imperialist in Afghanistan. But there was an indigenous Afghan or a socialist movement. There was a warring movement between the Maoists and the much bigger Soviet-aligned communist movement. And then within the communist movement, there was a division where anti-Soviets and pro-Soviets. There was a lot of these ideas. There are a lot of Afghans that want a different country. That's my main point. There are a lot of Afghans that want a different country. And the idea, going back to the idea of the tribal society, just because you see a university full of women that are in black shawls, don't think that every single person there wants that. Even if every woman in that room wants it, I can find a fucking room of Americans that are crazy. Then could give you a very, very weird impression of America. But there are a lot of people in Afghanistan that want a different country, and I think that I think that we kind of reflexively fall into this idea that like until America comes or until another country comes and shows them the way, they're not going to get. I don't think so. I do think that there are people that are pushing towards the right way. They're in a bad state right now. You don't get out of 20 years of occupation and not have a bad state, be in a bad state. But I don't know. Yeah, that's all I want to say. We do have responsibility. All that other context. I'll stop the babble.
Kobe, I really want to engage with you on this topic. Before I do that, though, Stardust was to say something. Stardust, go ahead. Yeah, into your muted mic, please. Stardust, thank you.
Let's go.
My apologies. I don't see what's so wrong about opium. If people want to do opium, why not just let them do opium? Also, if people don't like it there, why can't they just move?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the marginalized people that we're talking about are actually the people that chose to stay.
But you're not.
The United Nations Security Council guaranteed asylum seekers getting out, right? Like they were trying to get them to anywhere that they could find asylum. What's bait?
Such a straight face. It's impressive.
Basically, everything Stardust is saying, it's bait. Don't fucking bite it.
Actually, that's not true. I've come in here and I've actually argued very well for my points. So
heroin is good.
Thank you very much, though. Thank you. Maybe you. Yeah. Okay. All right. Don't be mad because I'm more entertaining than you. Okay.
Yeah.
First off, opium.
The child labor bit and the opium bit. Yeah, it's totally not bait, bro.
I don't interrupt you.
You're falling for it right now.
I don't interrupt you when you speak. So maybe you don't want to interrupt me when I speak. It's called politeness. It's called politeness, okay? I will let you talk as long as you want, and you don't have to add anything to the conversation. But I still won't interrupt you.
You haven't met Dr. K yet.
For some reason, I've met Dr. K before. It's the same story every single time, Dr. K.
I'm not a fan of
For some reason, whenever Star speaks, let's just interrupt her whenever she speaks. Even if I'm making a valid point, I may be trolling a little bit sometimes, but I do come in here and I actually do make decent points. I mean, like I think me versus Mio is pretty good. Okay, I think Prime and me go against people. I've been pretty alright.
You actually did a good job. When Mio was here, so that was good. Thank you so much. Okay.
No, hold on. I'm new here. If you make normally good points, can you try making a good point now, just to prove to me? Because I'm trying to listen.
Actually, just to make a point, because Dr. K here is having such an issue with me because I'm so entertaining, I am not going to make a point, Daniel Clark, but I do appreciate you giving me the chance to. I am going to finish what I'm saying. First off, Prime, you fucking suck at knitting, okay? And it's a disgrace. It's a fucking disgrace, Prime. And secondly, why are we trying to tell people what they can and can't do with their own bodies? You know, if they want to put opium in it, let them do it, okay? I don't give a fuck. All right.
Hey,
Yeah,
You're
heroin
so
for
funny.
everybody.
You're so funny, Doctor.
Okay. Let's start
Team
us.
drugs, let's
Like,
go!
no. Just to like start us. Like, yeah, it's fine for just like letting one guy like have opium. Like, why not? It's like it's just a regular thing. But as a society, though, it is mixed things way more of a different context in this case. As with
Who's taking the
having
bait
a whole
now?
entire context of where you have a bunch of people addicted to drugs while we're trying to run a country, will always end up being a corrupt, failed state because so many people are trying to keep themselves
Very true,
high
yes.
while still trying to go on their daily lives. It doesn't work. We've seen that with in China.
Okay, Dan.
That
Since
failed
you're
within
engaging with
within
me
the
in this
end of-
argument,
No,
Dan,
I know,
why don't
I'm
you just get up and
explaining
move?
the argument? Star, I already explained it why.
No, Dan, I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. You're excellent. Thank you. Okay, all right, guys. I'll see you later. Have a good one.
Bye, Stardust.
Oh.
He's a treasure.
Okay, well, I'm going to respond.
she's a
I'm going to
drama
defend her
hog.
then, if I can, because Portugal decriminalized drugs 2 decades ago, and they haven't fallen apart. It's more about the economic system. It's more about the sustainability of the society broadly than
Sorry.
drugs
Let's-
banned. Okay.
Let's hold on.
Yeah.
Portugal is a terrible example. I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry.
Way more
Portugal
corrupt
is
than
it's a
the-
terrible example because when Portugal decriminalized drugs, all of their really hard, like life-ruining drugs, it actually went down. The amount of use cases in
Can we
Afghanistan.
get off
it's
of
not
this?
the case.
Yeah.
That's
I
what
don't.
we're saying.
I really wanted to
we-
engage
we-
with
we-
a couple of the
we-
points Kobe made.
We're doing that. So Kobe, I want to like yell at you for a little bit. Not yell. Actually, I like you a lot. I yell at other people. I'll yell at Dr. K. But no, not you, Kobe. So Kobe, I want to say something, and then I'd love to hear from Knight here, and anyone else who wants to join in. Okay. So you said a few interesting things. I talked about this tribal system. I thought that was really poignant, right? Something that we don't get here in the West, right? Or not lots of other places. If you don't have a tribal system, you're not going to understand a tribal system, right? It's like completely fucking foreign to you. But like that point about saying that like you have to. Oh my God, Dr. K, you don't have to be talking when I'm talking, right? That ends right now. That ends right now, or I can mute you.
Good.
Don't do that. I don't like it at all. I've made that clear for months.
Okay, we good.
Okay. They have that tribal system that they can't fit in into the global economy. That's like fucking amazing, right? Like I love that because it explains so much, right? Like we want to look at them as simply backwards Muslims, right? We're like though people of that same religion, right? And with a similar outlook, like a social outlook, have built great cities, and have all the fancy things that we have, right? Like that isn't the the deciding factor, and neither is the tribal system. There's more to it than that as well. But like missing that makes it difficult for us to understand what to do with these individuals, right? How to help to assist them, to help them out. So I just like wanted to like double down on that. Thought it was a really good point. And then the point about the opiates. There was something you said that I disagreed with. Now I literally completely forgot about it because it's been so long. I thought also the point about the opiates was great, and that people are just needing these things, right? Because their bodies, the hard work, not just construction, right? Like just the daily life of being in rural Afghanistan and fucking surviving is tough on a person's body. Those things aren't easy. And if you want to have some sort of relief from that, like I can't. Who am I to blame them for that? For doing that. You're gonna say something I disagree with at some point, Kobe. Then I'll yell at you then. But I don't remember what it was.
Okay.
So.
All right.
I think based
so,
on that, though, I would like to hear your response.
So there are two things that I wanted to respond to about your points, Kobe. The first one was that you said that the United States does have responsibility, especially to these marginalized people. I would love to hear more about what you're recommending for that, especially now that we've withdrawn. I feel like we've completely abandoned our obligation at that point, which I don't agree with at all. But moving on to the second point, you said that you think that there are a lot of Afghanis that want a better country. But the problem with saying that is that, just as you said, the tribalistic nature, when the as soon as we started moving our forces out, all of these militias like started to take position for defenses. They were ready to like mount a resistance. But the Taliban is this united front, whereas all of these tribal militias were all these disparate groups. There's not the same type of national identity that is formed in the West, and these militias just ended up folding one after another, and the State Department just had their hands on their head like, we thought that they would last longer. So like I have no doubt that there are people in like metropolitan Afghanistan, right? Like the sort of cosmopolitan culture that they've assimilated into, right? Yeah, that want that, but I don't think that they represent a majority of the population. And I think the best option is to just try to get them out, and that's not possible for all of them.
There's a couple mistakes with that statement. One, so it's not a purely Western thing that they weren't able to form. Like, it's not that they don't have this united identity we have here in the West. There's plenty of examples of, sort of local tribalism causing united fronts to fall apart. You can even see that in Western examples. Spanish Civil War is a sort of example of this. But, like, moreover, and the more important thing there is the thing that, like, this doesn't represent a majority. It's like, while you will have a variety of disparate views on how a country should be founded and what shape it should take, this idea that, like, the majority of Afghans, are begging for this, backwards government that's going to institute Sharia law, like, that's just not true, my dear.
Okay, let me answer kind of everything, or like multiple things. How to help? I remember conservatives got very angry a couple years ago, I think maybe last year, because we gave like $2 million to schools in Pakistan for like gender studies. That's what we're going to do. Okay, gender studies in every Afghan village. No, I mean, I don't know. I don't think we probably the pullout was very bad. I think that a pullout should have worked, with I don't know, some sort of peace agreement. There were peace agreements happening that should have happened. I don't know the way. I mean, the way that we're kind of in a deadlock, or I mean, like I say this as if I'm at the table and I'm making this decision, but I mean, like, the international community is at a deadlock
all on our armchairs, right? We're armchair generals and diplomats.
Exactly. Yeah. It's because Afghanistan needs money. That's just the fact. They need money to pay for food and things, but people don't want to give the Taliban money, and I think that is ultimately I figure out that is basically the way that we should, the only way that we can help them, I guess, is I would like the America to take more of a forward step and maybe trying to figure out a way to create a neutral position with, not neutral position with the Taliban, but a position in which we can give the people of Afghanistan food. There's a way to do this.
So you support a removal of sanctions?
That's some of them, definitely. I would need to look at. I mean, I don't know what all the sanctions are, but yeah, I'm sure there's some there.
Claim. Yeah, I want us to get more specific when we talk about sanctions.
Yeah, I don't know what the sanctions. I don't know what they. But just to move on to the second question, something interesting. Going to the book Taliban at War, 2001 through 2000, or 2001 to 2021. That is why the Taliban win. The Taliban is a army that fights in a very guerrilla fashion. They understand that they can win. They cannot win through a war of attrition. They have to win a war of stealth attack, or not stealth attacks, but taking the actions they can to inflict least amount of action to the most amount of damage. And they had enough agreements with enough leaders and of both militias and tribal leaders that there's just no way that the ANA would stand up without the support of the U.S. military. And that's just the ultimate reason. I mean, I think you had a larger question of like, how does that reflect on the Afghans people's wanting of another system? And my answer would be it seems that Afghanistan is just a very deeply undemocratic country. And in the same way that it doesn't really matter in America what the popular vote of a state about marijuana is, and it matters what the specific voting counties want about marijuana, and that's going to be very, very different than what the state wants. That's just, I think that's something that has to be understood. I'm making a claim that perhaps is a overly utopian claim, because I'm saying, well, if Afghanistan worked in a different way, that my system would work. But I do think that there are a lot of people in Afghanistan that would support this other government if it came into being. But I think that where the people that matter and the people's minds that matter in Afghanistan are there's a lot there's a much smaller ruling class, and when it comes to that actually have a voice. In America, there's a lot more of an ability for the average person to speak, in a cultural sense. I'm ranting.
No, that's fine. I just quickly before we get back to the conversation, thank you, Stardust, for the raid, the 92 person raid. Much appreciated. Huge help. Hello, Stardust people. Should she call you people? Did she call a group something like dust particles? I don't know. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Okay.
The problem that I have with your praise of
I'm not done. Sorry. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. If you want to be a part of this, first of all, you can. Right. This is an open walk on panel. Exclamation open in chat. If you want to join us, so we'd love to have you. But if not, even if you don't want to jump on and be a part of this conversation, at the very least, hit that follow button right now. And in case you haven't done so already, if you're unfamiliar with this channel, we'd love to see you in the future. We do this 6 nights a week, right? We'll have a great interview tomorrow with a big YouTuber, right? Investment Joy. I'm super excited about it. I think you'll like it too. The guy talks about like unconventional ways of building wealth that might be accessible to you. Yes, you, broke ass Twitch watcher at home, right? So seriously, check it out. You might actually really learn something. And we have other content as well. So hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. We'd love to have you. Thank you so much. All right, now I'm done. Please go ahead.
The problem with praising the Taliban for their guerrilla tactics and their fighting potential is that you can apply the same thing to while that may have been effective against an occupying foreign force, by the time that the Taliban started marching in, they weren't using these guerrilla tactics against the militias. The militias didn't even put up a fight. It was like a blitzkrieg as they were just crossing the country. And the reason why it was so much easier for them to accomplish this was because there was no sort of coordination. There was no there was no uniting factor. Yeah, there was no uniting factor. There wasn't the organization necessary to oppose the united front of the Taliban, which have been waiting for this moment for 10, 20 years at this point. And the ANA crumbled, right? So I think that if they were to succeed, they would have needed some uniting factor. I don't think tactics played any role in it because there wasn't a whole lot of fighting, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the U.S. needed to have been building institutions during that 20-year period, and it just didn't do it well enough.
I don't agree. The Soviets did this. The Soviets built very big institutions and spent millions of dollars to do this, and it didn't work. I actually think the real reason is you can't.
Well, how long was the Soviets occupying Afghanistan to be building those then?
What's that? What's it?
How long was Afghanistan occupied by the Soviets to be building those institutions?
10 years. They supported but they supported the. I mean, I guess I'm adding on the years of just support in the 70s. But the point I'm making is
twice as much time, and we were not able to do it.
The point I'm making, I agree that both of our ways are bad. I'm not saying that our ways is better than them. The point I'm saying is that even if we were to try to build up institutions and try to supplant the tribal form of life more so with our form of life more so in a more heavy-handed way, which the Soviets very much did, I just don't think that is possible. I think that is the ultimate folly. Is you cannot go into a country and you cannot take and without literally like a full-on cultural genocide, without to go like we're going to take the way that you organize society and we're going to implant how we organize society. So it's the puzzle piece argument. You can't make a.
I disagree. Tajikistan to its direct north is secular,
they have such a different history. Like I mean, going back to the cultural genocide, the Soviets had. We think, no, there's the motto of Soviet policy in the stands in the Central Asia was from tribes to classes. There was they did not control Afghanistan. They controlled Tajikistan. There was a mass slaughter of landlords, mass slaughter of religious leaders, of imprisonment and conversion to atheism and conversion to not these ideas of tribal leaders. That didn't happen. I'm not saying that is good, and I don't think none of the stand countries are authoritarian countries that are very much have a lot of their problems on their own. But that is, I would argue, that is why we don't see the same level of tribal politics.
10 years of occupation.
Tajikistan was
oversimplifying it
for 60 years.
Right? Yes, of course I'm oversimplifying, but
but it's not really helping.
I'm simply saying Afghanistan is not
trying to
this
give you the
unique
exact
tiger.
context.
They are. I think they are. I think they
They
are. I mean, there are
absolutely
countries
There's
are.
a
that
point. I mean, to explain like what Kobe's point, there is a reason why everyone, well, at least for years, they say Afghanistan is the death of empires.
I'm bringing that
Because
soda.
it's because of how difficult much of the place is with how it's set up with their communities and their own cultures. That even much of that it is very much a disaster whenever going even controlling that area. Even as said, you like they had 8 years or 10
Afghanistan,
years.
we're literally talking about the fact that it doesn't have this coherent national identity, right? It has tribalistic societies. Its borders start to sort of mean nothing as you get to certain parts of the country, right? Like this culture does spill off into its neighbors and affects how there is like a similar culture taking place in its neighbors.
Yeah, I don't think
think
there
Dr.
is,
K,
I don't think there is like that class conscious that you're trying to allude to.
I'm not saying there's a class consciousness. I'm saying that that Afghanistan
That's why I
can
said
be
you
approached
seem like you're
to
alluding to
in
it.
the way that other neighboring countries were approached to, and that they aren't this like unique animal that's simply unconquerable and like you can't ever like fix the Salafism there. You can.
I mean, they say it's unconquerable. Like the whole point is that we're trying to liberate, not conquer them, right?
Yeah, you know what I mean. I'm not saying
I know,
come
but
in and,
I mean,
and axe them in the skull.
I want to see it from Daniel
Yeah,
Clark,
but
and then
It was a poorly
and then
worded
Daniel
sentence.
Clark, Brento,
I know
and then
it's still the
Daniel
case.
Clark, Brento, and then Kobe. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much. All I really wanted to say was I think that we are sometimes underestimating or not thinking maybe clearly, or sometimes it's just hard to know because we're not seeing a lot of people in the media from kind of the general public. It's hard to gauge the general public's perception, the people that actually live in Afghanistan today. I have no doubt that almost all people that live in that region despise the Taliban and hate it. But the flip side of that, the other side of that coin is not people that value and love the West. I think the next step down, which would probably, I don't know the numbers, but would probably capture a large, wide net, is people that think the way that Western women dress is disgusting, the way that our music is awful, and we don't want to be anything like that. I don't like this idea that it's the Taliban and then everyone else is just like super waiting, begging for democracy. I don't think if we went in there and we actually posed the question, I think if
This
we went in there and asked,
characterization that the Afghans like all hate the Taliban is just false.
No, they're
It's
not.
just
no,
false.
not all.
They're
not all,
vastly
but-
they're vastly
pretty
popular
much
in
everyone that
Balochistan.
every woman that ran to the airport to give their kids away on the plane, those people hate the Taliban. And I'm willing to say that people that couldn't get to that airport is probably the numbers a lot larger. I don't think it's fair to say that if we go in there, kind of, for lack of a better phrase, it's an Australian maybe saying pussyfooting around. That clearly isn't going to work because the general public aren't ready for democracy. They don't look at our way of life with rose-tinted glasses. They think it's potentially awful. Then there might be some that don't, and those people emigrate, and that's fine. But it's just not that simple.
Let's go to Brento and then Kobe.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to catch you or anything, Dr. K, in saying that, but because I think you said it correctly, that it's like this idea that we're going to impose this on them, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it seems like they don't want it. I'm assuming they don't want it. Like, they don't want to function that way, right? And it's like, well, then, it's like, you'd have to conquer them to be like, live this way and do this and don't do that. Like, I mean...
No, not necessarily at all.
I don't agree. After 20 years of occupation and reform, it just feels like that folded, and it's like, okay, that's what it is. So it's hard to say.
Specifically, European imperial powers, Russia and depending on how much you call Russia European power, but imperial powers, Russia and Britain, the two biggest, have been directly like it's not to the same level of the Sykes-Picot Agreement of like just cutting up straight lines in the desert between Iraq and Afghanistan. Between Iraq and Iran, but there was a similar kind of complete disregard to ethnic and tribal lines in the states of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and border wars between the Russians and the British and all these kinds of things. And
the Wakhan corridor and all that.
The idea that the idea that you could see a peaceful replacement of such a deeply ingrained social structure as a tribal society is something I don't think that there is an example of anywhere else.
I'm not saying it would be peaceful, but I'm not saying it would be a conquest either.
Okay, I agree. It would have to be a civil war, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't think that America should fund a civil war in Afghanistan.
That's essentially what we were doing, is acting as the proxy force for one side
Sure.
of a civil war.
And I think that's not a good thing. I think that we went there with a very bad plan, and I think that's okay. I think that's why I think that we shouldn't. I think it would be bad.
Exactly. What we should have been doing is building up the institutions for the side of the civil war that we supported, to the point where, when it came time for us to leave, we didn't have to be doing this.
I mean, was that to a certain degree? Is that not the plan? I'm assuming it was the plan.
It was
the plan, and we failed at it.
The socialist government, the socialist government, that the Soviets spent 10 years building lasted 3 years, maybe like 2.5 years. They lasted a lot longer than fucking the ones that we did. The institutions are not going to do it. You can build enough roads and schools, and you can tell as many Afghan babies that Marxist-Leninism is true, and the overarching. You can't change everybody's mind. And to quote one time I was watching a documentary about the New People's Movement, which is a Maoist movement in the Philippines. Children are not raised by their parents; they're raised by society, and you can't change an entire society, in my opinion.
The problem
without a cultural genocide.
Oh, sorry.
Or not in 20 years.
The problem with Afghanistan's modernity,
tricky,
right, is that it is a very diverse, like, ethnically country. It has very rough terrain that separates peoples. What the United States mission should have been is trying to export the cosmopolitan culture that you find in city centers like Kabul to the rest of the country, and trying to build the infrastructure to connect all of these disparate regions like Balochistan, the Pashtun, like places like that. And we were trying to do that. We had like mercenaries like Blackwater out there trying to build these roads. We got to that point too late. The strategy wasn't effective.
Okay, hot take. Okay, imperialism typically very bad. Do not support it. But if you're going to be a successful imperialist and have an imperial goal and get it, you got to be a dictator. Okay, you cannot have a fucking democracy, or you can't be voting in new leaders every fucking 2 years, and then the liberals take over, and the conservatives take over, and the centrists take over. We'll have a different plan. That's the biggest fucking problem we've had as a. If you're, I don't agree with a lot of America's wars, but if you're looking at it from 100% a pro-America side. I want America to do its plans. Is we go into Afghanistan with one plan, and then Obama takes over, and he gets 8 years, and then we get fucking Trump to come, and he gets 4 years, and now Biden has that time, and he makes decisions. If you actually want to do this and make supplant Afghan culture with fucking cosmopolitan Western culture, we need to have a dictator of America, or a dictator of a country that can have an iron.
You would need that for the first 3 generations of people. You would need that for
Literally,
3 generations of people.
And Kobe is right to some extent.
Sorry, hold on. Was that necessary? Hold on. What about for Japan? Was that necessarily necessary to change their culture?
Japan had. I'm not as educated on Japan. I'm not as educated, but I do know that in both Japan and South Korea, the government was quite dictatorial and cracked down on labor movements and cracked down on opposition, both on the left and the right, very severely until I believe in Japan the 1980s. I'm not 100%. This is we got 2 years. Yeah, but I believe, but I do know that there's a lot of there was a riot in the 1960s in Japan, a massive labor protest, and there were shots fired in the crowd. It was a lot of that kind of shit. So I do think that there need that you do have to have to I mean, I get that. There's a lot of horrible things that happen in Japan, nuking, firebombing, and post. But in order to do that, I think they did do this kind of authoritarian thing to
fascistic parties. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple things. Is one, the presidents following World War II successively followed each other's plans for Japan in the big strokes. There wasn't too much of a sudden shift in policy there. So there was a relative stability on that front. This was a nation that beforehand had already built up really strong institutions, and keep in mind that fascism was actually relatively obviously monarchical authoritarianism was a thing in Japan for since Japan, But like this breed of fascism that had taken over during World War II was still relatively a new and young ideology on the country, and that there were strong institutions that existed alongside of it that we built off of. So keep that in mind. So Japan does not mark clearly onto this case.
There's a different case to be made for it, because in
Exactly.
Japan's case, they didn't have the allies that Afghanistan could potentially have in this situation, because they pretty much made an enemy of all their immediate neighbors and almost everyone else who remained relevant after World War II for a long time. So they didn't have the options to just defy things like sanctions or economic pressure from the United States. Like, they really had no choice but to do kind of what we said, because we forced ourselves on them economically.
Well, they had two options: align with the U.S. or align with the Soviets, and Japan's ruling class was like, "Yeah, we'll align with you, U.S. if you."
Well,
let
yeah,
us keep
because
our
they
shiny
attacked the
hats."
Soviets in World War II and really pissed them off. So
Exactly.
All right. I'm going to break up this tangent and say thanks, everyone. I'm going to head out. I am Carl, a.k.a. Soyatl, formerly known and still known on YouTube as Your Environment Seattle. I'm going to do a little bit more memes, try to stream a little more. Hey, I just fixed my office. Anyways, thanks so much, everyone.
Soy,
Great history lesson.
Carl,
And-
first one,
Yes.
thanks for the support earlier. Much appreciated. And two, I didn't think you were actually going to fucking change your name to that. I thought you were just kidding.
No,
You-
yeah, I actually, yeah, you're like, who? Soy out. Oh my God. You know,
Are you
it's-
sure you
it's
want to
time
leave the stream? I think we might be on the brink of solving the Middle East crisis. Are you sure you want to leave? Because I reckon we're words away from finishing.
We're gonna solve it.
I did just want to say one thing. I wanted to respond to somebody in chat. OnlyFacts TV said America
Never
was
respond
never
to
there to
chat.
fix Afghanistan. Stop deluding yourselves.
Yeah, of course it wasn't.
The reason why the United States went and its allies went to Afghanistan was to, number one, stop the training camps of terrorist groups like Al Qaeda, right? And then once we got there, we wanted to maintain bases, right, so that we could monitor things in the region. We would have a place where we could project power from, because the only other place we had that was in Saudi Arabia, right? But it is always beneficial for you to be when you're in this position trying to occupy these countries, you always want to have a stable government. You don't want things to collapse under you, right? Like the puppet presidents that we put up, we wanted to cement these institutions into Afghanistan. So it is absolutely in the United States and its allies' best interests to try to fix, quote unquote, Afghanistan.
Who's going to say oil? Who's going to say oil?
Correct. No,
Well, it's not oil.
No, it's not.
I
No,
think
that's
it
true.
was. I think it was actually copper. No, I'm joking. I think
they have
that
rare minerals for sure.
Pokemon cards.
No. From what I mean, I actually do would push back against this. I think that the way that we're using fix is not get rid of the Taliban or set up a U.S. base. It's like make it a Western democracy, right? I do not think that was the goal. I think our goal was that we wanted to come in, and I think at the very minimum we wanted to get Osama bin Laden, and the fact that we couldn't do that very quickly, and the fact that the Taliban, depending on how you, I think they did, say
Dick
that
Cheney didn't
like,
want to kill Osama bin Laden. He had an opportunity to, and he turned it down because we all know he was profiting off of the
who
war.
did? What's that?
Dick Cheney.
What incident are you talking about?
Give me a second. I'll pull it up for you.
Yeah, sure. So I know that they got very close in Tora Bora, but I do believe that he just got away. They just got away. That's at least my understanding.
Because we didn't.
My larger point is that I think that the sort of minimum is they wanted to get rid of the Taliban, which I don't think would be fixing it. They could get rid of the Taliban and install a super strict Islamist government that was technically not the Taliban and call it a day, right?
I posted it in VC chat and read it at your leisure.
So I had a question for you guys, unless it was someone else's turn. Do you mind? I just wanted to ask. Say what?
Can I go after you?
Sure. I just wanted to ask, what did anyone see a different outcome than this occurring when the U.S. pulled out, and what do you want to see? In
Uh,
reality, not
I
like
actually-
it's like
anyone
it's
saw a
U.S.
different
number
outcome.
2, like not like that, because most
Hold on.
people here probably wouldn't want to see that anyway.
I
They
think
have
we
some
knew
other
what was
hate
going to
they
happen.
wanna
We
see.
were being warned pretty extensively by the military officers we had in the area. But go ahead, I'll let you have. You probably have a better point to make.
No, that's the question. It just
I
seems
want to
like
hop out
it's
really quick. I want to hop out.
obvious.
So I'll answer this. I'm going to leave. I actually think, like I was saying, I don't have the stats on me, but that like 2010 through 2013 era, we got the Taliban pushed back in a very big way. And like I was saying before, I don't think we could change the society completely, but I do think there could be a pull-out strategy where America pulls out then, and the government that is in power is not the Taliban and is significantly less radical.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
The
The
thanks
most
for being here.
successful instance.
Thanks for being
I think
here.
it's
Kobe.
Dan the Step wants to speak, man. He's been
Yeah,
waiting
hold
so
on. Yeah,
long.
got it. Thank you. Kobe, thanks for being here.
Yes.
I really appreciate you, buddy. I hope you have a fantastic night.
Yeah, I'm going to put a free download that's 100% legitimate to the books I was talking about earlier in the VC chat if you want that, so you can download them.
Thank you, my dear.
Thanks so much,
Oh,
Hunter.
Kobe, you're
Have a good
leaving?
one.
Yeah,
Come on,
but-
stay longer.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Dan.
yeah, it's like it was never really going to be successful in the first place when usually the best, most effective answer to even get, like, if you take down the Taliban or at least your enemies in that location was to do like concentration camps, which obviously is not the answer that the United States will ever do. Yeah, no, like where
We've used them
But,
before.
we're trying to get to the point, but as to get to like what Brento said though, is that there was no real, there's not anything else other than having like this end up happening. Maybe it happened much sooner or much less within a year, but it was like that.
Well, Wilhelm, we've actually used concentration camps.
No, that's the only effective thing. I think it's a terrible idea.
But I mean, no.
Terrible
But you're
idea,
saying
but,
that's
like-
like not something the U.S. would do, and I mean, we have.
Yes.
I was
Yes.
right. I was right to drink before this panel because I was going to be in pain because of foreign policy takes, but I thought it was going to be about Ukraine. So frankly, I'm fascinated. What the shit, Dan? You can change a culture without using concentration camps.
No,
just
what?
by the way,
No,
dude.
there's nothing to do
Yes,
with
you
culture.
can.
I think he means
No,
within the
it's
time
not.
frame. I think he means within the time frame.
Within the time frame of, if you want, like, yeah, but it's and to make the point, it's terrible to do it.
You
'cause,
mean
like,
re-education camps?
no, not literally concentration camps.
Uh-huh. So
Dan,
you're changing a
completely
culture
whack.
through concentration camps,
no,
but you're not learning
That's
anything in those
not
concentration
that's not
camps?
what I'm trying to. That's not what I'm leaning to.
Okay.
I'll just drop it.
No. Dan, you made a point.
No,
Just,
he's
hold on.
wise too.
Shut up, Dr. K. Dan, you made a point. I'm trying to understand your point. So,
Yeah.
you're saying, you could change a culture with concentration camps. How?
No.
Well, you can't.
The point. No, you can't.
Okay, you
Literally,
can't.
and all it does is harm people. The only thing I point specifically concentration camps as being most effective way of dealing with like resistant movements and all that. That's all I mean by that point.
Okay.
For
armchair general.
changing cultures, well, specifically for that, it will take hundreds of years. And
No.
I'm not sure if it'll take time. Okay,
I don't
all right.
think hundreds of
Dan, I guess I understand your
Absolutely
point
not.
a bit better now. Anyone else?
I was gonna say so. He was talking. I don't know. I was gonna jump in on the whole like changing the thing within the time frame. I don't think anything was possible within the time frame, and I think we knew pretty extensively that it wasn't going to be successful before we put out. I don't think we realized it was going to happen in 14 days. But the thing is we had been, like I said, warned pretty extensively by the military officials we had on site that the people that they were training to be the resistance to the Taliban moving into Afghanistan were not ready and were not really trainable. Like they hadn't. There was problems with education, illiteracy. Obviously, we've already touched on drug use and just an all-around not being dedicated to the interim government, if you will, because basically what it was at the time. So I think we knew it just wasn't going to work. Responding to Brento from his question.
Okay,
previous.
yeah, I could see that. And I mean, just to comment on that, when people said like, well, we were surprised it fell so fast. And it's like, which means you didn't expect it to stand up, which means that everyone else was expecting it to fall too. So of course, if everyone can read the writing on the wall, when the time comes, like everyone's just going to put their guns down. Like,
Yeah, I think there is a line as well to like how long you can expect a country to stay in an occupation situation without doing something incredibly drastic, like really awful and collateral damage. If you're willing to accept 3% as collateral damage, maybe you can get by for 20 years. If you're willing to take 80% as collateral damage, well, of course you can make some drastic moves and things can potentially change, which is obviously not what anyone with a
if you're more heavy-handed, you're more effective.
People will accept almost any situation put onto them if their like living conditions and like the day-to-day of their life is improving over time. Like people would accept an occupation for 20 years if their lives were consistently getting better over those 20 years, but that wasn't the case.
Once you get past fresh food and fresh water and shelter, the whole idea of improving is subjective, and I think that
I would disagree. If you are modernizing infrastructure, if you are improving access to various amenities, no, you are improving people's lives over time. The issue is the U.S. was not building institutions within the country. There was no domestic manufacturing being created. There was no like jobs capacity being created. The infrastructure remained rather primitive. Even today, there's, I think, only one major tunnel that goes from Kabul to the north.
Why do you, aside from, let's just agree that America didn't do enough, why do you think that when the Taliban wasn't such a huge presence there, why do you think it was hard to get Afghan people on side to realize that this will be better for you? Let's just assume that we all think that way.
Well,
I'm finding it hard that in every conversation like this, Hillary Clinton could not say the word Islam in her debate.
You're putting the cart before the horse here, though, because it's improving conditions that come and bring people to your side, not the other way around.
I think that's true, but you can only do that with the help of the community that you're in. You can't go in and do it for them, like literally.
Yeah, but we had enough collaborators within Afghanistan that we could begin those sorts of projects should we have wanted to.
You think we could have propped up like creating manufacturing industry?
Certainly.
I mean, I don't know. I'm asking you if you think we actually could have gotten the workers on site from the Afghan population to create those.
Yes, but you would have needed collaboration from neighboring countries that would have had the capacity either to help them with the shipping end of things, or implementing technologies, or being a consumer base for this new industrial sector that they created. Which means
you want to ultimately bring
of one of 4 countries. You'd need participation from Iran, Pakistan, China, or a collaboration of the stands, all of which just do not want to work with the U.S. because the bridges have been burnt there.
Afghanistan is kind of like an oasis, in in the Middle East. It's very much disconnected from the rest of the world, whereas everybody's trying to reach their hands in.
No, it's famously very connected with the world, my dear. It's the fucking Silk Road, and like even today, it is the major point of thoroughfare.
It is definitely on a very focal point, right? But like when we're talking about like multilateral like agreements, like things like that, Afghanistan has never had like a high position in the pecking order, like in their regional like power structure, right? They've always been like the lowest on the rung. They haven't been able to modernize. They don't have like this.
Why do we think that is?
They haven't been since the 1600s.
Well,
why do we think that is?
The reason why is because number one, the terrain, and number two, Pakistan is more like 4 or 5 countries, right? Like. It's very difficult.
You could say that about every country.
Sure,
well, not really, not every country,
but not to the same, same extent. You can look at these things in like a spectrum, right? Whereas Afghanistan is like on the very disconnected end of that, right? They don't have like the same sort of patriotism, like people from Balochistan or Pashtun or from Kabul or the north, right? Like they all have these different group identities, and that's subdivided further with like tribes. And I think ultimately, modernity being brought to Pakistan was the United States like ace in the hole, and they jumped on it too late. Like, you're right, they should have been working on infrastructure, they should have been working on the manufacturing. These are all things that bring in people from other countries, other regions, like in a peaceful sense, right? Like, they're not soldiers coming for war. And
Well,
that's what you
exactly. When
need
you
to like
have
build up the
peace, that's
country and
when
get
you
it connected.
when you have peace, that is when you can begin creating institutions that foment national identity.
Why haven't they
Exactly.
had that? I think the question is from the 1600s, as you mentioned. Let's just pick that date. From then to now, let's leave like 100 years of U.S. interference. Why is that region the way it is?
It's a
Because they were
country in the mountains.
The soccer.
No,
they
I
were
don't think you
soccer
can
ball
put it down to
colonial
geography. If you want to put it down to geography, absolutely fine.
Geography
I'll take that. I'll
absolutely plays a
take that on the
large
chin.
role.
I will take that on the chin like a champ. But I want to hear some other reasons. This makes me nervous. Not really, because
No, he actually
in
is
Australia,
right to say
but I'm
geography is
worried.
a major factor.
Okay, I've written down geography. I'm going to put it in my notepad right now.
I'll give
Geography.
you another
I would,
one, though.
but I think these reasons,
You could just
and
do
one
a
of
quick
which.
Google. Dude, you could just do a quick Google. I don't know. I'm not super well read on Afghanistan's history, but you could just do a quick Google and see that Afghanistan was in wars even before the U.S. went to war.
And what were those wars based
Even
on?
before the 1900s.
And also the tribal nature of the country that we keep talking about. Do we know why those tribes started, and what most of those tribes really are?
Well, you said give a
What are
reason
they?
other
Just
than
say what you want to say.
You said give
No,
a reason other than geography, right? But like one of the other reasons is that they have these identities that
Political soccer
existed
ball.
before Afghanistan, right? That the people have since like associated more with than like the United Nations, right? So like Afghans, they absolutely think that there's an Afghanistan. They, they call themselves Afghans, but this is only really strong in like cosmopolitan areas like Kabul. Like in other places, they're not gonna even identify themselves to other people as like an Afghan. They're gonna say I'm Pashtun, like I'm this and that, like I'm Uzbek, right? Because you have all these groups that are scattered around.
In the end of the day, like base night is right. Like you can't. So like I understand. So there's this weird thing about like American exceptionalism that really pushes this idea that when you do imperialism, things just can get solved. It's not how it works. Like you need to think. Like base night brought something up really relevant earlier. That's actually very smart. Where it's like, even if you don't agree with how people do things, you're still better off working with them to get them to progress to a better place than you are going to war. Because in the end of the day, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to make the world better for who? The citizens of that nation, right? Like that nation's citizens, not the leadership. So if you don't let people have an economic, if you don't let people prosper economically, there's no way you move forward socially. Like people aren't going to start thinking about social progression if they need to worry about like what job they're going to have tomorrow. Can they live in this neighborhood? Which party should they be afraid of? Like these things aren't things that they can think about while trying to become better people in terms of like what the West defines as better people. Because you need to understand the world exists in different time capsules, and you can't just accept everyone to just like go through 200 years of progression all overnight because someone decided to occupy them for 20 years and not give them a state of like not being shot at or not fearing explosions and that stuff. So it's not like when the West went there, it became better instantly overnight or even over the past 20 years. They were just like, oh, we're hoping it will get better by fixing this one tiny area. But like he said, if you create economic progression, like through factories, manufacturing, if you create a resource they can import and export, create partnerships, etc., then they can become a part of the world.
Right, and to kind of push back on that and go off what Dr. K was saying, I think we didn't really have the logistics for that, for the reasons Dr. K mentioned, because we had countries surrounding Afghanistan that weren't exactly our friends, still aren't, and would not have allowed us to bring in those kinds of things, like logistically speaking.
That's not true.
Bring in what?
Sorry. That's not true. If by we I assume you mean the U.S.
Sure.
That's not why people are against the U.S. being there. People are against the U.S. being there because the U.S. wants to build military bases.
That's why it is.
It's just like, but if
This
literally
is
people
the
are
step
bringing
of
in
nation
food,
building,
sorry,
not
I'm still
anything to
talking.
do with
Dr. K, I'm still
popular
talking.
support.
Dr. K, I'm still talking. If you want to bring in food, if you're literally bringing in food to people don't give a shit. But that's usually not what's happening. It's like the whole thing with Venezuela. People are like, oh, we're bringing food. That's not what was happening in Venezuela.
It's like this is not. Let's not do like dishonest type of conversations. This is like the NATO Ukraine. I actually want to talk about Ukraine tonight.
None of us.
It's like the NATO Ukraine thing. It's like you're just giving dishonest conversations about what's actually happening. Yes, I think it would be great if everyone helped them. But for example, Iran, when Obama decided, hey, let's help Iran. Let's say you give us this, we give you this. Iran was progressing to a point where you can have conversations with them and they'll like actually talk to each other, and they'll eventually get to a point where you can have maybe a partnership with them in the future and you won't be afraid of them. But when you like fuck with people and then you're like, oh hey, why do you hate me? Like, what the fuck do you think is gonna happen?
All right, that's valid, and I agree with that. But all I was saying is that they weren't in that moment letting us, and yes, because we were trying to do other things like build bases, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, there's
At the end of the day,
there's also sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
at the end of the day,
is a massive PR campaign.
Yeah, at the end of the day, modernity and democracy, capitalism, like all of these ideals that like we like a lot of leftists, like a lot of American liberals like wanted to see implemented in Afghanistan, have to be built on like solid foundations. You can't just like skip past go, right? Like there's work that needs to go into that.
Foundations.
Yeah. Wait.
I think to go off what you're saying right now, basically, I think if we really wanted to enact change, it still isn't going to happen within 20 years we were there. But if we really wanted to enact lasting change in Afghanistan, we should have started with education to create a populace that would have been capable of doing the things to build the next level of infrastructure. Like if we want people who can work in these factories, they have to be able to read a warning label. And I think even as of this year, like 10% of the population is still illiterate. We didn't even start at the right place. Like we didn't even.
You also have to get past the massive hurdle of women being educated. And how do you get past that? You need to have a very serious conversation about how strictly people in that country adhere to their religion. It has to be a very serious conversation. This conversation couldn't have even.
No. Fuck that. No. I'm not doing Islamophobic rhetoric. I can go at this with you.
This is the problem.
Let me.
Hold on. You interrupted me. You interrupted me to jump down my throat.
Did you live in the Middle East? Did you live in the Middle East?
My wife's from the Middle East.
Have you lived in a Muslim theocracy?
I can see that you have been triggered, and I am sorry about that. But I have not said anything. I have not said anything Islamophobic. Not one thing is Islamophobic. My wife's father, my father-in-law, is a Muslim. Not anything. It's got nothing to do with Islamophobia. But the adherence to certain sections of that text in that region, especially, I'm going to get to the end of the sentence if it kills all of you, especially in certain aspects where young girls are getting acid thrown in their face and women can't drive in Saudi Arabia. All of this stuff, the more liberal, the further away that it gets from the text and the more liberation of women in any of those societies, the more progressive and better things get. To not even be able to say that without everyone blowing up, to me, is crazy. Just to be able to put a flag there and plant it.
That's not the problem with blowing up. That's not why I blow up. Why I blow up at you is not because of that. Why I blow up at you is because you throw away culture and you completely go straight to religion. The problem in these countries is not religion, dude. It's culture.
You're doing the opposite. You're doing the opposite.
No. I shut up. I ended up shutting up. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I ended up shutting up. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I'm sorry about that. Okay. All I'm trying to say is like a lot of these places, there are places that are Muslim and have freedom for women. I'm from Lebanon. We have a majority Muslim country. Women can do things. It's not like they can't drive and do other things. In Saudi Arabia, as much as a Muslim theocracy as it is, I live in Saudi Arabia. I don't think it's changing that fast, but it's still changing. Things are moving forward to a direction. Women can drive now. They don't have to wear the abaya as often, like depending on where you are. Things are moving to a direction. They're even talking about like they might start having clubs with alcohol in them, which is like not a thing since like 10 years ago. So they're actually moving pretty fast in comparison to most places. Yeah, all I'm saying is religion can inform these things, but over time, cultures can move on. But the thing that you're missing, the piece that people keep on forgetting to put in, is culture matters as well as religion. It's not purely religion.
Of course.
Because there's plenty of Muslims. There's plenty of religious Muslims in the West who aren't doing any of this shit. Also, it doesn't say throw acid in people's faces in the Quran. It's not part of
Of course not. Of course not.
It's a Salafist thing.
The only thing I want to say, and it's only because when this was demonstrated to me, it like kind of opened my eyes a little bit, and I'll not take more than 30 seconds trying to explain it. But if you imagine this massive circle of kind of super like Muslims that might live in your local town, my local town, like my suburb and stuff. And you've got Muslims that practice every day, and they are absolutely Muslim. They believe in the faith. Great, no problem. Then you've got this inner circle of Muslims that are hyper conservative, super conservative, that really don't want Sharia law, but they really want Muslims as much represented in politics in whatever country they live in. Let's say, I'm just going to use random numbers. Let's say
you mean Islam as a rule base, right? That's what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. They're not full Sharia law, but they're getting somewhat close. They're hyper conservative. Then you've got another circle, which is Islamists, which are people that completely think suicide bombing is okay to spread their faith. It doesn't matter what country they're from. And if they could snap their fingers, every country would be living under Sharia law.
Well,
and then, hold on, please, Dr. K. Please, no, I'm sorry, that's not true. The last circle is jihad. Dr. K.
Oh my God! Hey,
Dr. K, that's not what Islam means.
I want to hear from Knight.
There's
no need reason to interrupt him. Like, let him finish. Holy shit! It's that simple.
This is just the last. This is the last circle. The last circle is jihadis, which, generally speaking, are from the worst places in the world that are, heavily Muslim populated, and those are people actually willing to put a bomb on or pick up a gun and actually enact violence on others. Now, hold on. That percentage there, I agree, is a small percentage. It's not as small as some people make out to be, but it is small. That next circle, though, that next circle, though, is a scary level of that. That is a scary level. If you happen to live in a place,
still a pretty small part of it. Sorry, are you talking about like the next circle that lives in the West?
Let's say it was.
Wait,
what about 5%?
I just want you to clarify something. Do you mean the next circle that lives in the West? Because you were talking about people who want to enact
all
Islamist
Muslims
laws
across the world.
in the West.
No.
Oh, sorry, it was jihadis and then it was Islamists? Sorry, it was jihadis and Islamists. Sorry, I forgot about the second circle. I thought you went straight to the other one. My bad. That's my bad.
No, yeah. And that's not in any one country, that's worldwide.
Look, I don't mind you talking. Look, here's the thing. A lot of people in chat are bringing it up. This is like the Sam Harris rhetoric. I don't mind you talking about Islamists and jihadists, but I think personally it's important to make that separation because people around you who don't know as much don't understand the separation. So they think you're talking about all the 1 billion people on Earth who are part of this religion, including people who live in the West who don't believe in any of this bullshit. So what I'm saying is, I agree with you. Those people suck ass. I'm not trying to defend fundamentalism. Fundamentalism sucks. I'm against it. I am personally not religious. So like, I'm not defending the religion in that aspect. I'm defending the religion in terms of I don't want people to receive hate just because there's people who are over there who are just like
100%.
Islamists. So what I'm saying is be specific. I'm just saying if you're going to say jihadis, say jihadis. If you're going to say Islamists, say Islamists. If you're going to see these people who are like very specific, be very specific. And also about the term jihadis, it doesn't mean what you think it means, but it's been kind of co-opted by the West to mean one very specific
But it's a term that everyone in this room will understand.
I understand, but I would still opt out of using it and just go for Islamic fundamentalists because I think everyone understands that at the base level and we all get it.
Sure.
So it just I understand. I understand where you're going with that though.
Daniel, my question is, you brought this up at the beginning. They would need to have a very serious conversation about the rights of women.
That's definitely true.
In
almost all Muslim majority countries.
How do you? Well, we're talking about Afghanistan.
Yeah.
How do you propose initiating that conversation?
This is an answer that will probably surprise most of you, especially after being called Islamophobic, which actually took a little bit longer than I thought. But in my honest opinion, that we have to get Muslim apologists. There's a really great one that I know of, Majid Nawaz. He's from Britain and from a place that I used to grow up in. We need to highlight in my his writing, his interviews, the way he carries himself and talking about.
I'll wait.
Yeah, please do. And we need to get Muslim apologists and also Muslims on all ends of the spectrum. So any conservative Muslims that are willing to speak and actually have open. We need to highlight their voices, not our voices. Our voices, we don't really know what the fuck we're talking about half the time. But in a lot of these countries, these kind of conversations cannot be had. They cannot be had. They can certainly not be broadcast. And that to me is a really fundamental problem. But because we are worried about coming across Islamophobic, that conversation is not allowed to be had.
Do you think that those broadcasts weren't allowed during the U.S. occupation and the presidency?
Yes, certainly. And even in Saudi Arabia now, there's still a lot of there are people that are scared to even, the support for killing apostates from last time I checked was about 75%, and that was in Egypt, and that was like
Supported by that's a partner of the U.S. by the way.
Yeah, and some of the numbers at some of the most radical countries won't even let the polling be done. To me, it's just a problem that we have to be able to talk about soberly without like getting yelled at or getting super annoyed. If you're worried about painting all Muslims with a broad brush, please. Now I'm married as of a couple of weeks ago. That is not my intention. But you have to be able to criticize faith, any faith, without being called an Islamophobe. I think Islamophobe is one of the most dangerous concepts, but there's certainly people who are Islamophobes, definitely.
No, it's not a dangerous concept. Sorry, the Sam Harris arguments aren't really going to work in this instance. You should talk about Islam as a faith instead of talking about Muslims. That's the main thing. If you want, yes, exactly. But you're not doing that. Is my problem. And the main thing I would say also don't listen to Majid Nawaz, because there's many more people in the UK specifically that represent Islam in a much better way, like Mehdi Hassan, than Majid Nawaz.
What do you think about Ayaan Hirsi Ali?
Sorry.
What do you think about Ayaan Hirsi Ali, or have you heard of Ayaan Hirsi Ali?
I don't know that. I don't know that person personally. But Majid Nawaz is dangerous because Majid Nawaz is someone who was an extremist, and he believes most Muslims. Yeah, but he believes most Muslims believes exactly what he believes, which is his problem. Yes, I've listened to several of his talks, both with people he likes and people he doesn't like. He believes most Muslims are like him in terms of like he wants to paint all Islam in this weird, extremely conservative, extremely lethal kind of way, where he wants to apologize on behalf of Muslims for everything, but Muslims don't need to apologize for shit because they didn't do anything. It's the specific people who did things, the fundamentalists who did things. That's like going around and asking Christians to apologize for everything a U.S. soldier did or the Pope asked to do or whatever the fuck it was. You can't ask people to. You can't ask.
It's like that's actually a really good example. Yes, correct.
Criticize. So I need to respond.
He's saying
to
we should have Islam apologists, which is just a weak way of saying Muslims should apologize for following their faith.
No, it's got nothing. The apologist doesn't mean apologizing.
Rhetoric matters, dude. Rhetoric matters so much, especially for people like Majid Nawaz, who's an ideologue. He was an ideologue when he was an extremist, and he's an ideologue when he's anti-extremism. He's both. He was always an ideologue.
So Daniel, you said that under U.S. control, Afghanistan couldn't broadcast anything like that, which is just
no. That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
You absolutely said that.
No. What I said is conversations, and I don't want to take up all the time here, but all the kinds of conversations about being able to openly criticize religion and talk about like ideas, pretty much what we're doing now, cannot be done in a lot of these countries. The U.S. didn't have any control.
It was done in Afghanistan under U.S. control. They had OCAB, which is a network that had both domestic and international channels, different programs. So, but I don't even think that the addition of like more liberal-minded, like different, Islamist apologists is even the answer. The answer is that there are children growing up that have grown up in U.S.-controlled Afghanistan that had female teachers. Right, like that is the type of progress that like leads to the consequences that we're hoping for. Right, like
correct.
It's
and
not
that type of progress goes against what the Quran says, which is all my point. And there are some people that live in different Muslim majority countries that realize this, and they step further and further away. Just like Christians, God is an ever receding, just the God of the gaps. They're just getting further and further away from it, and eventually we might not hopefully have the Western Baptist Church. And I do think the same goes for the other side. I think the further that people step from the Quran, the more rights women get.
Yes,
and if you're not able to say that that's to his link, then I don't know what to do.
How did the West move away? They progressed technologically, they progressed economically, they had trade, they had all these things happening first. But what you want to do is you want to go, hey, let's give everyone rights, let's do everything the way we're doing it, but let's not give you anything else. And that's the issue.
I don't want that at all.
Criticizing Islam. What I'm saying is, the reason why I have to focus on culture is because culture is what's dictating things moving forward. I understand Islam is part of the culture, but culture matters in this instance because you have to like give people time to move forward. You can't wish for it overnight, which is why what the thing Base Knight was saying is when you give them economic progress, these people can evolve and move forward on their own time, on their own pace. And that way it comes from a dogmatic view from within, which means it becomes resilient. It stays longer. It actually
Yeah, yeah.
prospers.
Let's go to Brento. Dan, I think had a point, and then Leonidas, did you want to say something? I'll put you in line, and then
yeah, I'll say something after they talk.
Okay,
sure.
I mean, Cham, do you not feel like Islam is the root, or like the Quran is the root of Islamic culture? Like it's the cornerstone. It's the law book.
Yeah,
do you feel like it can even be separated in any way like that?
Yes, just like the way Christianity's been separated from Western countries. What do you mean?
I don't know if it necessarily truly has been, and I'm not actually sure. I don't know if that's really possible.
Sorry, I'm more speaking of it the way that Daniel was speaking about it, where they get further and further away over time. But I guess it was not fully separated, but it's more like you walk away further and further from the core.
Yeah,
I'm
think
just worried that after 600 years it's not happening. It's not happening on its own. I don't know.
Sorry?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if
what's
I don't know if it
repercussions?
can really be separated like that.
Sorry, what do you mean by repercussions?
If the Quran is the cornerstone of Islamic culture, then the further it moves away from the Quran, the less it'll be like itself, and that will cause like a lot of conflicts. If it's the book of law on which like your society operates this way,
Muslims themselves don't follow like hadiths and stuff are written, and there's just rules that people just don't follow. Like over time, people stop following rules, right?
Sure.
Like it just
usually from outside influence only. It's not usually from within. That's very rare for that to happen. It's, for instance, it's the example of a family, and then the police kick down the door. Then the kids that have been kept in the basement chained to a radiator realize that's not normal. You're giving societies, not just Islamic societies, you're giving societies a lot of credit to assume that it's just going to change on their own. Some do, some don't. But
it's fine.
It's 2022, and it's like the situation in the Middle East has not changed much. It's 2022.
Yes, but a lot of the countries you're asking to change have been in the middle of like Afghanistan. Like this is just a cursory search, but Afghanistan's been in war for at least 200 years, I guess. So it's like you can't ask these countries to change during times of war. It's like when people expect Cuba to change while they're still under sanctions. It's like Cuba can improve itself, but they need to have the ability to trade and to prosper. You can't just expect these things to happen. It's like Iran. Iran was moving in debatably positive direction in the 50s, and then one coup happened and that made it worse, and then another coup happened and made it even worse. So it's like there's all these countries that can progress over time, but you have to give them the time and space, and you don't have to give them, like, I'm not saying the US has to give them money, other people can help. I'm not really asking the US to specifically do that, but you need to give them the time and space to economically progress. And yes, it is fucked up because we're going to have to let people exist who are doing terrible shit to people. In the end of the day, it just is what it is. Because otherwise, what are you gonna do? Get in armies that come in and kill those people anyways? Like, what's gonna be the difference?
The problem with that, Shammy, is that when the Taliban are ruling Afghanistan, it is like a war. They wage war against what we call progressivism, liberalism, intellectualism. Like, they wage war against equality. So, like, as long as we have groups like the Taliban that are legitimately governing like vast swaths of Afghanistan, we're not going to see that peacetime where there's an opportunity to grow and industrialize and learn and so on.
I mean, sorry.
No, I've spoken more than enough. Someone else go.
Okay, so I was gonna say anyway. So the whole thing that sparked this initially, my point.
I'm sorry. Dan wanted to say something, so I want to get in Dan, then Leonidas, and then
Oh, my bad.
No problem.
Much of my issue with what's going on is not specifically done because of religion itself. Is done through the philosophy of that, even specifically of that kind of religion. I mean, we can make similarities, as Daniel has said, about between like Westboro Baptist Church and other sects that have been going on for a while, that have done their own violent turn-in of their Christianity, and I do the same with much of this kind of violent rhetoric of these Taliban idealists who end up being against secularism, against liberalism, against the Western world, and all of that. A lot of those ideas first came up during the 1800s by a preacher in Egypt. It's not like simply like a thing that goes beyond just because of the religion itself as to its original culture and whatnot. A lot of it is based off its philosophy that's been going on, and a lot of it the U.S. has even helped even before we even invaded. And these schools are in Pakistan, not in Afghanistan. And obviously we can't even invade Pakistan because they have nuclear weapons. So it's pretty much if going through this, it will end up still being a lost cause as it was before. And a lot of what these Taliban do, just hide in Pakistan, and then when it's safe, they go back to Afghanistan to keep fighting again.
Okay.
So
Right, like
yeah, I kind of wanted to tie it back into perspective with like who's ruling the country. We have the Taliban in charge, kind of like what Base Knight says, and the U.S. designates the Taliban as a terrorist organization. And tying it back into the the premise of the conversation, what's our responsibility? Well, because we designate them as a terrorist organization, we impose sanctions on them. But that does not, just saying that, but it does not prevent us from getting money to people in Afghanistan. Like we've given, according to this article I'm looking at, we've given $782 million as of October to humanitarian aid in Afghanistan, and that's from our government, not even private organizations. But I mean, I think we can all agree that changing the culture was not something that we accomplished or that we could have with the things that we did. So the conversation should go, where do we go from here forward to help the people that need help?
I just to chime in really quickly, just to understand like who the Taliban are, they are part of a movement within Sunni Islam called Salafiyah, and it literally what Salafiyah means is that they are trying to return to the traditions of they're trying to like model their lives and the life of society around the first 3 generations of Muslims that
Like
are supposed
Republicans.
to have been like the purest form of Islam. They're called the Salaf. So like these are the people that we're dealing with, that we ceded this country to. So at this point, moving forward, after we've abandoned our occupation, we've withdrawn. I don't think that we're going to see the United States like trying to re-engage in any sort of meaningful way at this point.
I think the question is, and maybe this is a moral ethics question, but I think it would be like, I'd be really interested to hear what you guys think, or just in general. You've also got to sort of weigh up, and I know this is kind of always comes up with collateral damage, but let's just even, because we might not even be necessarily going back in. But there is a question to be had, and it kind of came to me when you guys were talking, so I haven't thought about this for more than 10 seconds, really. But it kind of brings up this idea of, we're thinking about the Afghani people that live there now and are living, breathing, sentient, walking around now. But like, if this conflict is not resolved for another 50 years, or things get hundreds of times worse, then you've got to think about people that aren't even born yet, and the millions and millions and millions of lives that it goes forward. I don't know if that's an argument for possibly going in with heavier military action. I genuinely haven't thought it through enough. It just came to me, but I thought maybe it would be interesting to hear what you guys think. Because
you mean with Afghanistan?
Yeah.
No, I don't think we should go in with any more heavy-handed military. That did not work.
There's zero political
last
will.
time.
There's zero political will.
What the hell would that even be? We pull out, and then we go back in immediately. What the fuck?
It looks bad. Yeah, the optics.
It doesn't look bad. It's terrible. The optics wouldn't matter. It looks like
it
exactly
doesn't
what
matter
it
how
is.
it looks. It just would not work.
Yeah.
The problem is,
I'm sure we could make it work. I just don't think it's
democracies,
necessary.
as democracies, we're always beholden to the public, and the public does not want us to be around the world, right? Like occupying, and as an occupying force in this country that has little to no strategic value to us.
I would disagree about the strategic value for sure. I think there was a lot of strategic value in Afghanistan, seeing as how it's on the border of China.
I mean, we have South Korea, Japan, right? Like the reason why we originally wanted to have bases was so we could project power against Iran, right? And keep an eye on Pakistan, and probably be able to have like another dimension which we could approach Russia unnecessarily, and obviously to keep training camps of terrorists out, but they've all moved to Pakistan anyways, and so we can't confront that at this point. Afghanistan is like the people of our countries don't want to invade and occupy this nation for 20, 30, 40 more years, until whatever it takes to make like some sort of unfailed state.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we would like if the question is like, would the U.S. like to have a base in Afghanistan and like good, like ties with the government, or have it be an ally? Yeah, but no, apparently no. So I don't know. Apparently that's just not going to happen. Maybe that's not what it is. So
Can I ask Brento Box a question? But I guess it does go for everyone. Just when you kind of said before, like, oh, we definitely wouldn't want to go back in. That was awful, which I kind of see right now. How bad would things have to get for anyone here to think, oh, okay, we've made a mistake, we have to go back? Or do you think that line is just uncrossable, even if you're witnessing like Holocaust type events, or like how bad does it have to be before we go?
I think we need 9/11 2 Electric Boogaloo.
yeah, at a certain point, I don't think there's anything that would get people to go like, oh, it's our primary responsibility. We need to go back in. Like, we have to be the ones to do this. Like, I mean, at a certain point, if no one else is doing it, like,
oh no,
like,
I mean Australia, UK, like America and its allies. I mean,
sure. I don't even think that seems like such an impossibility that I guess like there would have to be like a spaceship that crashed with aliens on it that started like going out from Afghanistan. Like I can't imagine.
Also, if they started just slaughtering
it would have to be like
everyone.
Independence Day or something. Like I don't know. Like
No, I don't
within,
think
within rationality, I'm not really sure.
I don't
to what degree we would be like, well, we're bringing the whole military back and we're conquering or invading the country. No, I'm not really sure. I don't know what could possibly do that. So
I don't even think
it would
the
have to
Taliban.
be.
I don't even think the Taliban like executing a genocide on their own people would bring.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think it would have to be a direct threat to either us or our allies, which honestly, Afghanistan.
Yeah,
is not posed a direct threat.
That's probably the correct answer. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and I've seen some arguments made that says like, oh look, they're gonna do another 9/11. I don't think it'd be to their interest of wanting to go through something like another 9/11, or at least another kind of attack ever again.
Absolutely not. We would just hit them with cruise missiles, level their infrastructure. They saw what we were able to do against them in like 2001. They do not want to see that again.
Yeah. Unless you're
I was talking about attack on us. I was thinking of how bad does something have to get morally before America, being the greatest country in the world, the leaders of the free world, go, you know what, we have to do something right. I think that's a really convenient. I'm not saying I know what the answer is, but it's a convenient moral position to take. It doesn't matter how bad it gets, we ain't going back. To me, that's
I've never seen America. I've never seen America conduct foreign policy based on morality. So
I'm looking other base Canadian.
You know
yeah,
what
I agree
would
with him.
happen?
I completely agree.
If Afghanistan actually has a lot of oil, then it'd be like, yep, we'll do it again, motherfucker.
This whole oil thing, man. If America wants oil, it'll just fucking buy it. It just buys it.
Not really accurate.
If Australia wants oil, we just buy it. We don't have to go invade a fucking country for it. Oh.
Okay.
So I wanted to let in I don't know people.
So I guess the answer to the question of this whole debate is that no.
Can you hear me?
Right?
Yeah. I want Jacobus. You wanted to say something, but quickly before then, hey everyone, support the channel if you're enjoying this content. First, hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live just 6 nights a week. We always have content for you. So if you're new, you're liking this, we do a lot more of this, and we do interviews. We'll have a really interesting interview tomorrow. So come back for that especially, and also support this channel by subbing. Right, if you like this content, subs to the channel, gift bits or gift subs. All of that really does help us a lot. It allows us to continue to provide you with this level of content, but we need your help to do that. So I consider subbing to the channel, gifting bits or gifting subs to keep us up and running. Go ahead, Jacobus.
Okay, so I think I remembered my initial point I was trying to make, and it was basically, so you talked a lot about Saudi Arabia and its relation to Afghanistan when it comes to their take on women's rights in the workplace, and like you made a point specifically, training up women in the workplace would be necessary to facilitate this country to support itself economically on its own. I wanted to challenge that base point in and of itself, because I don't actually think it would be necessary, not to underplay the importance of women in the workplace, but I think you absolutely could have created an economically stable Afghanistan without actually having the conversation.
Sorry, was that addressed to me?
Yes.
Yeah. You probably could. I don't know whether you can argue that that would be good. But if you were guaranteed a result, I guess you could probably argue that. But my only real point is wherever you look in the world, whenever women had access to education and were liberated, prosperity tends to follow that. I think it's an idea that, in my opinion, is a moral absolute. It's not something that people can say, well, our religious text says this, so this is how we treat women. I don't care. I can say, I believe, and I can say in front of anyone that I believe it's a moral absolute that women have to be treated as equal. So I don't really care what your book says. In my opinion, building any sort of faith and therefore culture around that is just so problematic that, so I think you're right to answer you. I think you're right. It probably could be done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not a matter. Okay. Well,
could be done. Maybe.
I think we could approach it pragmatically and say it almost certainly can be done because it's been done other places. I'm not saying it is the best way to go about it. And once again, not at all to downplay the importance of women in the workplace, because I think you're correct. I think even if you look at that pragmatically, you would see the results of the positive effects of introducing women to like the workplace as a whole. But it wasn't really like the point at the time. What I was trying to say is that specifically, if we wanted our plan to be effective, the initial plan that we had when we'd gone into Afghanistan, we needed to start with education, because getting an uneducated populace to produce something, to have like a primary export that they base their whole economy off of, that lifts them up economically, and then therefore allows for us to put in place the institutions necessary to facilitate them being independent in the future and not falling in 14 days to the Taliban. Would have all been possible without ever having the conversation. Not to say the conversation didn't still need to be had. Probably could have done it by example, which was the point that Base Knight had made, where if you start doing all these things in America institutes how exactly the education is going to be taking place, pretty decent chance that if we apply our values there, you're going to see like female teachers, and therefore it's going to impart itself on the culture as a whole. And la-di-da, it could all have a domino effect down the line. But that's...
To be honest, to answer you directly, I think you're actually... Now, I've kind of just thought about what you just said when you said pragmatic. I think you're actually probably right that if you want to get the Afghan people on side, you probably do just have to go to the men and kind of appease their cultural values as of right now. I don't think my approach would work. If you dropped me in Afghanistan, I think I'd be dead very quickly. I don't think what I'm saying as this boisterous person would carry very well there and say, no, right, women, you got to come in. I don't think so. So I think you're absolutely right. I think at the beginning, the US should have been smart and said, well, let's try and build up the male workforce, build infrastructure, and then hoping that, women come soon and everything starts to even out. So I think you're right in that regard. I just think my ideal world would be, everyone equal.
Yeah, if we can snap our fingers and fix all the problems, it'd be great.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Just to add on to that, it's important to remember that in Western countries, we started educating women off of the premise that educated women would make better mothers and better wives for men. And most of the progress that occurs in Western countries occurred gradually over time, and it was internally once essentially the men in power allowed for progress to occur. So, in terms of creating progress in foreign countries like the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and Afghanistan, that is also going to have to get done internally as well. And a partial way to sort of market that is to say that this is going to help your economy, and if you open your workforce to half the population, this will improve the economy as a whole. It's a very gradual process, and it's very tricky because every country has its own texture in terms of misogyny and culture. But overall, nation building has to be done internally, and external intervention has very large limits, as we saw in our failures in Afghanistan.
Absolutely. It's got to be, basically, I mean, I think you can boil it down to it. Either has to be extraordinarily well-crafted and tactical, or so heavy-handed that it just works no matter what you do.
It's a bit like the North... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would say heavy-handed just rarely works at all. I don't really see many parts in history where heavy-handedness has ever led to the progression of human rights in any way or form. Whether it's the Eastern European blocs, Middle East, Africa... I don't really think there has ever been a situation where progress has been forced and that it succeeded in that way. External forceful intervention just isn't really a good way to make progress happen. Unfortunately, the only way I see progress happening in Afghanistan right now is if we literally work with the Taliban as a legitimate government, open up their economy in some way, and try to pressure the people to sort of open up educational institutions for men and women across the whole country.
Use the carrot instead of the stick, basically.
Basically, yeah.
Do we think there's a difference between, just because this word's come up multiple times, do we think there's a difference, or is even the difference worth discussing? The difference between intervention and influence? Because I think right now, like North Korea is sort of an extreme example that I would guess most people have seen and sort of get. That one of the main problems they have is they just don't have any external influence because everything goes through the government, right? So they don't see movies and TV. My wife's parents, like Netflix has like opened their fucking mind just to general ideas of like sex and relationships and things like that. So I feel like it's not necessarily about intervening with guns and boots on the ground necessarily, but one of the problems is there doesn't seem to be a way to kind of influence even really effectively or tactically. And that goes for any sort of Western or any other country. That doesn't seem to be possible, especially not now with the Taliban control, but even prior to that.
So we gotta talk about the difference between intervention and influence. Intervention is, you know, kind of the stereotype of what we all know today. America sending soldiers in, bombing people, doing all the military hard power sort of diplomacy. Influence is more like when you have a stranglehold on their economy and be able to use your economic clout to influence the strings of power within the people of power of that government. So if you really want to influence the country to get better, you first want to open up their economy so that you have a voice in their economic system and a voice and hand in the oligarchs in power of that nation. So again, just to use an example, sanctions do not work on our enemies. Enemies do not care if we sanction them. But when we sanction our allies who are tied heavily to our economy, that is a really great way to influence our allies, whether it's good or not. And if you want sanctions to work, if you want our demands and desires to be accomplished, it's very important to integrate our own economy with the economy of others. And that's what we're going to have to do with Afghanistan over the next few years.
I mean, sanctions have to happen. Like, they're an escalation. Like, but if you are going to try and do I don't know, have some sort of force, execute force, or apply force to any nation, right? Like whether you're going to do it militarily or otherwise, you would have to decouple from them economically so that you're not relying on them, right? Like it's when you sanction somebody, you're like, well, we're just not going to do business with you now, like because you're really not operating the correct way. So it's like, well, then yeah, of course. Like, how could you do anything but sanction them? That has
they're not dependent on you. What's the point?
Yeah,
like,
you go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, if they're not, what he's saying is like make them depend on you first, and then create sanctions so it's actually painful. Because if they don't depend on you, a sanction doesn't mean anything. It's like, I wasn't giving you water already, I'm not gonna give you water. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Holding the water bottle up in the air and going, you see this thing that you didn't have? I'm not going to give it to you still.
Not to mention, if you do sanction someone who doesn't depend on you, all you're really going to do is just push them into the hands of your actual enemy, like China or Russia or something. Right?
Yeah, populism is on the rise. Iran, China, and Russia have all used sanctions as a talking point to support strongman dictatorships. It can really, sanctions when used incorrectly can be really used to shore up nationalism in our foreign countries.
Yeah,
you guys
that's
have
a really
the...
good.
No,
Sorry, I was
go
gonna say
ahead.
that's a really good point. When you create an external enemy, like he's basically saying, like when you create an external enemy, that's how you get a country to want to stay behind the local leadership. Because if you don't want anyone fucking with you, it's definitely a foreigner who doesn't really belong in like your I guess governance.
Yeah, he does make a really good point when it comes to sanctions, because it is true that sanctions haven't really worked on our enemies. When we sanction Russia, it doesn't stop them from aggressing on their neighbors. When we sanction Iran, it hasn't stopped their nuclear programs. So I totally agree with that. And I would lean more towards the lifting of sanctions, although you have to say and bring up that sanctions it's very hard for us to lift our sanctions in the first place.
Yeah, there's also a problem of political willpower. I mean, just to be frank, many Americans don't really understand foreign policy, don't dive deep into it, and don't think about the complexities of it. It tends to be more into an us versus them. How can we make ourselves come out on top? How can we look better, stronger, diplomatic in any way or form? So it leads to people to having very narrow-mindedness when it comes to our diplomatic decision making. And unfortunately, people don't look at the big pictures. So right now there is not at all a lot of political will to open up the economy for the Taliban government right now. That's what makes all of this very careful.
Is the general attitude, and I don't know because as Prime, I've seen a lot of your videos, especially with Destiny, so I'm fairly familiar with your community, but I've not been here very long, so I don't know for a fact. But is the general attitude, or for you guys on the panel, would you guys generally say that there's almost no justification for America's military intervention going forward? Like, was sort of Afghanistan the nail in the coffin where you kind of like no more? Or if something happened down the line, would you look at that situation in itself and possibly be for or against it?
I mean, if okay, look, the U.S. a lot of times says they're doing things for defense. If the U.S. was actually doing things for defense, like actually acting as a peace force, which I don't know why you'd risk your own population to do that, but if they were, sure. But like, I would say there's a reason to intervene. For example, if your partner is bombing a bunch of Yemenis for no reason, there's a reason that they have, but like not a good reason. I would interfere and say, hey, maybe don't do that. But I don't think military should be boots on the ground anywhere. And also, like, just speaking about it from like, if I was just trying to put myself in the American perspective, I would say, you guys have a lot of automated weapons and drones and shit. Why would you send human bodies that would make war less popular? It makes no sense.
Yeah. No, I mind any kind of form of military intervention. So yeah, drones or anything like that.
Yeah, I think military intervention within our sphere, it can be justified if it's for something like you said, for defense. But I think it's safe to say that Afghanistan is no longer in our sphere, and it would be very, very difficult to justify and intervene once again.
I would. Okay, I'll let everyone go. I'm really interested because that's fine.
For me, I just want to say that we already have a better alternative to boots on the ground. We have drone strikes. Like,
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's
just something.
That's what I mean. Anything that you can think of that falls under the banner. I would like to think, and maybe I haven't spent enough time really thinking about this, which is completely possible. But I would like to think, as an Australian, our closest neighbours are like New Zealand or even parts of Asia, where if something was like really fucked up going on, that we would offer to help, whether or not they're listed. Like Cambodia, I don't really know that we have an amazing relationship with them, but it's not negative. I would like to think that we could go, you know what, we'll help. We'll be there, we'll help. We've got bodies as a last resort, but we've got drones, the technology, we can help. And then if we can rely on America to lend us a hand if we absolutely need. I'd like to think, as long as the intentions were good, and that's where things do get murky. I'm just talking as a moral question, whether you would think that was a moral obligation. If someone was getting beaten up across the street, I would go and help. And I'm just wondering, how bad do things have to get? Just as a general idea, because Afghanistan's definitely put a bad taste in all of our mouths.
Okay,
as a general idea, yes.
Okay,
you have to approach foreign policy, right, through the eyes of what is to your tactical advantage, right?
I disagree.
And, right. Well, that is how
I disagree fundamentally. Not
that is.
Yeah, I believe it is now. Yeah, I definitely believe it is now. Yeah, I believe it is now. I just don't know whether that should be the only factor. I think moral ethics should probably be. Maybe that's why the world's so fucked up as it is. Maybe that should factor in more to our decision making. I'm not saying that's easy to do.
Recognize that a lot of people only entered World War II when Germany became dangerous to them, and not while Germany was doing morally like atrocious shit. So
right, but when we
how many lives would have been saved if they didn't do that?
Yeah, of course. You're talking about from you're not talking about from like a pragmatic point of view, as in what would they do. You're saying, in my point of view of ethics, when should they intervene?
Yeah, and then countries should hopefully work to move forward in the most ethical way possible. Maybe we are at that now. If that's the case, that makes me a little bit sad. But I would like to think that and even just for you guys on the panel, that if you saw that you could help with some drone strikes to really help, and of course the military works it out to be worth it or not in terms of casualties and blah blah blah, but to really stop like a genocide or something fucking horrific, Like, Jesus Christ, you guys spend so much on military, it's fucking ridiculous.
That's
not use it, it's crazy.
point. Someone just makes like, what about would you use all things to stop my nightmare? Like, here's my worst insane nightmare. Would you just then go in and it's like, yeah, sure, I guess maybe like in the worst case, like we'd probably only go in a matter. I think Leon said it's a matter of like allies or self defense. Like it would have to be something like drastic. But
So
as far as
that's
like,
only
no, your
affecting
country's
you.
not operating right, we're gonna like poke you. Like, no, we're probably not gonna.
Yeah,
do
good. Yeah, that's okay. But I'm using examples. I'm giving examples like genocides, mass killings, horrible attacks. It doesn't have to be. To me, that's a pretty slim choice. If they're attacking me or my allies, well, that seems rather selfish.
The problem at moralizing in foreign policy is that when you see military action taken on the behalf of morality, like look at the consequences of doing that in just the Cold War, right? The United States, like a military superpower, lost the war in Vietnam. We had to agree to a ceasefire in Korea. There was like a lot of bad consequences. The way that you win this, and I think Ax Leon was talking about this earlier, is through finances, right? Through like multilateral agreements, through trying to build economic connections. That is the way that you do this.
Were we being moral in Vietnam and Korea? This is news to me.
Yeah, yes. Capitalism was absolutely viewed as a moral good in comparison to
Proxy
the evil
opposition
communists.
to communism.
I guess I hear what you're saying.
Communism was synonymous with totalitarianism at the time.
I guess I understand where you're going with this. I guess I just don't look at it that way. Like when I hear operating in a moral fashion, I don't think like promoting an economic scheme is the same. But I hear what you're saying, that they thought it was a moral good. So fair enough.
So
morality is fuzzy, and it's an important thing, but it's too fuzzy to base military campaigns on, right?
It's also
military campaigns require, hard data, and I think the fact that there's no world government, right? There's no like overarching, binding world laws or standards for this sort of thing, apart from like the Geneva Conventions. That it's hard to there's no framework with which to kind of let morality guide you along what is the right or wrong thing to do on the world stage in terms of like military intervention in foreign nations.
I would say, just because I don't want to appear like I'm a moral idiot, I definitely agree with all of you. If I was on a panel with people that worked in foreign policy and I was asked to speak to them, yeah, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably use that as a good example, and I think that's what should be leaning. But I was kind of just literally wanting to get your points of view of what you thought about it. But if you guys all think pragmatically, that's awesome. That's actually not a problem at all. But I was just wondering whether morally kicked you into going, we should do something about that or not.
I think if you want one, I think there's a long equation you can create of like, if I do this action, will I harm more people than the current thing is harming them? That's really the calculation I would use. So if more people end up dead because I enter, then I wouldn't enter.
I guess I'm from a moral standpoint. I'm
definitely personally and I'm definitely personally from a moral standpoint too. Like I agree. Like if people are like genociding, then there should be some sort of intervention to stop that. Like the fact that no one did anything about the Rwandan genocide is like shame horrific. On us all. Well, shame on us all, right? But the problem is that the realist in me also realizes that humanity is kind of just right now we're just a bit too selfish to be able to pull that kind of thing off.
Yeah, that's probably
I'm just from a moral perspective, I'm hoping against hope that we can become better than we currently are.
So,
but the realist in me says,
I'm not really sure how much I disagree with any of you. I mean, all of you have said pretty good points. My only issue is morality tends to be subjective from nation to nation. Like, how many people within Africa would want an Islamic state over their neighboring countries? How many people in Africa would want a Christian state over their neighboring countries? America fought the Cold War for capitalism because they thought it was morally good. Soviet Russia fought for communism because they thought it was morally good. It's really hard to project moral force onto others when the morality and standards for different nations is just so differing.
It is hard to do that, but I would definitely disagree with the premise that morality is subjective. I don't care whether you or anyone else believe that it is. I don't want to argue about it, but I would reject that premise and say morality is absolutely objective. And all nations should work in a way. But of course, then when you get people that disagree, well, then of course. But to me, the equation is rather simple of human well-being. Is it bad or good for? Is it good for girls to go to school? Yes.
I would like to.
Before we go into moral objectivism.
I mean, I would just like to point out my compromise though of morality and pragmatism. My compromise would be that the prioritization should sort of be a support for globalization, or rather trading with allies in a mutual transaction with other nations, and that would essentially be the practical approach towards foreign policy. However, the secondary objective should be raising the standards of living for ourselves as well as others. That way we can sort of focus on the economic gains without sacrificing anything, but we can also have more moral aspects on top of that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm addressing two things that happened in the conversation while I was waiting. I don't know your name. You're in the top right corner for me.
Axel.
Shemzilla.
You can call me Axel. Oh, no.
Well, yeah. It was Shemzilla. So you said the thing about is entering going to cause more harm than good? With it kind of is it going to kill more people than it's going to save? There's only one issue I have with this, and you probably meant it. It was probably part of your statement. You just didn't say it explicitly. It's that when you're looking at an issue that is taking place in a country where it involves like a belligerent and a victim, right? Then you have like this moral skewing thing where it's like, is it actually bad if it kills more people if they're all part of like the belligerent side, as opposed to the population of people that is like being genocided? Let's use that as an example.
Yeah, it's not a maths thing, is it?
Is it worse to kill more people? Yes. Is it worse to kill more people, even if they're all part of the people who are like genociding a bunch of other people?
People you're trying to help.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is worse, yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Damn, I've killed 2 million bad guys. God damn it.
Yeah, it's like the joke where they say like Hamas is killing LGBTQ people, but it's like the missiles are too. That's the meme.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
like,
That's
yeah,
fair.
sure, but like, are you killing them as well? Like, that's what you need to figure out. Like, where's the medium where you can help the people you're trying to save?
Okay. And the other thing I was going to say is you made the parallel to if you saw somebody getting beat up across the street, you would like hope that people would run over and help. The difference is when you're dealing with America and our military power, America isn't like the friendly guy who's across the street who runs over to help you get beat up. They're like fucking RoboCop walking down the street, and it's so much more than that, because our potential to enter a country and do way worse than we intend to, because of how we can deploy. Now, I'm not saying we're totally inefficient, we're incapable of doing things correctly, because obviously we're like an adaptive military force. You know, we're huge. We have tons of people working in the industry to make sure things work properly. But it's a big question when America gets involved, and our sphere is probably already too big as it is. So it's complicated. I don't necessarily think looking at it to just jump into war on a moral standpoint is ever really a good thing, especially when things get super muddy.
So we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, everyone. Hey, if you've been appreciating this, if you like this stream, hit that follow button right now. Make sure social notifications are on so you know when I'm going live. I will be back tomorrow, and we have like a great interview lined up. I think you guys really like it. Come around. We have like a big YouTuber who's coming through, unless they cancel on me, because people cancel on me all the fucking time. But anyway, we'll see. It's a fucking hazard. Let me tell you.
I will cancel.
That's why I fucking hate announcing anything, because people cancel all the goddamn time on me. Anyways, right, whatever. Yeah, we'll do that. ! Social and chat. For our social media, check us out on Twitter, where we tweet things on occasion. Discord, where we Discord things on occasion, and YouTube, where you'll find the VODs, right? So if you miss anything, like, comment, subscribe, consider becoming a YouTube member, and supporting us on that platform. It's a huge help. Hit that join button if you haven't done so already. Okay.